Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Battlechads. I'm Josh, and I'm joined by my co-host, Sam. Hi, Sam.
Hi, Josh. How are we doing?
I'm doing really well, Sam. Do you know what? How are you doing?
I'm just gonna say that I'm good. We've not got enough pod space to talk about it because we actually have a really interesting topic today, right?
We do. A really interesting topic. And it's, we've got our... we're coming into the new season, the new RCQ season, which is going to be modern. A lot of people will be happy with that after, double standard seasons. But to join us in talking about modern, we've got two of the most prolific modern experts that I could, well, certainly the content that I consume anyway. So we've got CntrlFreak and YungDingo. Hi, guys.
Hello. How's it going?
Yeah, we're all good. So we've asked you to specifically come onto this because you are a modern specialist. Dingo, you are a streamer. You've tried all sorts of decks. You sort of gravitate, am I right, to certain decks after you've tried a few. Usually after you've won a couple of challenges.
Yeah, I would say like anytime I find like a hidden gem that's not necessarily meta, but something that I'm like really digging playing, or I just think is well positioned in a particular meta,
Yeah.
I definitely gravitate more toward that. In general, I would say I gravitate toward mid-range decks.
Mm-hmm.
I know Michael over there is a man of similar culture with all of his death shadows and whatnot, so I totally understand being a mid-range player, but it's hard to be a mid-range player right now, if I'm being honest. It's tough.
So Mike, you Dingo alluded to the fact that you are similar in terms of you like your deck and you specialize it, but you do dabble and you do brew, right?
I mean, brewing in the sense of, do I want 20 lands or 19 this week? But yeah, you could say I reach outside of my comfort zone. Dingo's worlds better than me at swapping stuff up from week to week. I've got to like bash my head against a wall for months on end to try to get something to work out, and so it takes all kinds to make the world go round.
I think we're for what's lined up in this pod. I think we've got a great crew for that. And before we move on to the actual pod introduction, Sam, you've got a little message for us, have you not?
Mikey and Dingo might be specialists in the modern format, but one person or one element that's a specialist in the accessories format is our wonderful sponsors over at UltraPRO. I swear at this point, I'm just kept for the segues.
Yes,
I'm going to keep on going with it.
Yeah,
UltraPRO are a incredible accessory provider. They provide everything you need to look after your collection, your modern decks, some of the decks that we're actually going to talk about in just a second. So we're very lucky to be sponsored by UltraPRO. Me and Josh are currently shuffling their Apex line of sleeves.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, very good shuffle, very pretty art, perfect combination for your next modern event. So if you're looking to pick up some sleeves, take a look at UltraPRO.
Cheers, Sam. Yep, I mirror that. Excellent products, excellent sleeves. So this pod, what we're going to do is we are going to look at the most top played decks in Modern currently going into the new RCQ system, and then we're going to sort of put them in a tier list, or we are going to put them in a tier list to give people, the listeners, a really good idea of where they should start. You've just had 2 seasons of Standard. What deck should I play in Modern? What should I go into the Modern season with? And hopefully this pod will help you in that decision making. Are you excited, guys, to talk about some Modern?
It's been like a year since Modern got brought up. This is the time to be alive.
Let's go. So we do have a list of the 15 most played decks according to MTG Goldfish, and then we're going to go into potentially some little spicy hidden gems that the cast of this pod have come to. So we'll go to the tier list now. So we've got a tier list here that we're going to populate throughout this pod. This is the top 15 decks, like I said, on MTG Goldfish. We're gonna talk about, put them in a tier list, and then this will, or hopefully, give the players or the listeners an idea of what to play in the new RCQ format to try and qualify. So how it's going to run is I'm going to introduce the deck. Sam, you're going to explain the deck, what the deck does, and then Mikey and Dingo, you're going to then have a little conflab with the rest, with all of us, and try and disseminate these decks into the appropriate tier list. Everyone okay with that?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's go. So the first deck I think is more appropriate to talk about is, let's go straight to the top, is Boros Energy. Boros Energy is currently the most played deck in Modern, and it's got the most sort of played meta share. I think if any deck that you pick in Modern right now should have an idea on, or should be able to beat Boros Energy. Sam, what does Boros Energy actually do? What kind of deck is it? What is it?
So if you're listening at home and you don't know what Boros Energy is, I think the best way to look at Boros Energy is essentially Jund from the Modern of old, but existing as a 2026 Modern Horizon strategy. So it relies on really cheap, efficient creatures that have really quite strong synergies together, and then essentially builds a deck upwards from there. It plays the early game with those. It tries to middle out the game with elements like a Johnny and Goblin Bombardment, and then it can even take that long game as well with cards like Arena of Glory and Flage, Titan of Nature's Fury. I think that it definitely doesn't play like John, but I think it actually fills that void in the format. It is like the aggro killer, the mid-range killer, the control killer, which is why I think it shares so much of that percentage.
Cool. So lads, what are we thinking on Boros Energy?
Dingo?
Well, I'm gonna let Mikey start, and then I'll give my opinion.
Throw it back to me. I think that Boros Energy, in my mind, is like S minus. I definitely put it really high up there because the deck just has like 0 fail rate. It always does. Consistent game plan, which, like you mentioned in the intro to the deck, beats up on the aggro decks, the mid range decks, and the control decks. And all you really have to do is sideboard 5 to 10 cards, Orum's Chance, High Noons, whatever you want for the control or for the combo matchups, and you have a very reasonable shot into anything that you run into. The only reason that I wouldn't put it like S plus or solid S is you have the biggest target on your back known to man. Everybody is gunning for you every single match. You know most of the hate pieces that are going to be brought in against you, the toxic deluges, the wrath the skies, whatever the case may be. But Boros is still 20% meta deck because despite all that, despite knowing it's got the target on its back, it still comes out and doesn't stumble. And as soon as the hate piece isn't there or opponent doesn't find the piece of interaction they need, it just runs you over.
I'm very much of the same opinion as Mikey. I think that Boros Energy is S tier, maybe not S plus, because I think you could even sector this up into S plus and minus, but without getting into semantics, Boros, I think, is frankly the most consistent deck in Modern.
Mhm.
It's even more consistent than a lot of the decks with cantrips in them, because all of the cards in Boros are just good on their own, and they work with every other card in the deck pretty well. They don't really need like an A plus B where it's like this card is only good with this card. Like Goblin Bombardment is amazing with Ajani, but Goblin Bombardment is still good with Ocelot Pride. Goblin Bombardment is still good with Flage. Flage is good with putting cards in your graveyard. You know, like a lot of these cards are just powerful on their own, and they don't need a lot of like highly synergistic draws for the deck to be functional. So I think Boros is without a doubt S tier. And also you get access to white, which is just the best sideboard cards in the format. You got Deafening Silence, High Noon, Rest in Peace if you really want it, Clarion Conquer. Like you have hate pieces to beat every other deck in the meta if you build your sideboard to beat those decks in particular. And white has the tools to do it, and so does red. So I think Boros Energy is without a doubt S tier.
Yeah, and I think
completely.
I think with this particular deck as well, like it's winning on a fair axis as well. So it's not like it's consistent and powerful, but it's still turning cards sideways to beat you. Right, it's not having this convoluted, uninteractable combo. It's still on the edge of fair, which I understand your point, Mikey, of S minus ish. Sam, shall we stick this in S tier then?
As we stick it in S tier, Josh, I think it's also worth mentioning that on the topic of Boros Energy, like it has a massive target on its back, but there's not like it's not like you're playing against Affinity when you want to bring in your 4 copies of Meltdown to like smash that plan. While there are good cards against Boros, there's not like the one anti-Boros card because it plays on so many accesses as well. In my opinion, at least, it's quite a tricky deck to side for, I found personally.
Yeah, Dingo hit a really excellent point on the deck that I really want to reiterate because I think people skip over it a lot. There is no A plus B plan to the deck. You can hit any threats in any order at any point in the game, and they're all fantastic. Like you hit triple Guide of Souls start, well, they just start jumping each other and run away with the game. Multiple Ocelot Prides, well, City's Blessings online turn 3. Hit multiple Johnny, flip 1 and start flooding the board. Like there just are no bad sequences with the deck. And that's super difficult from the other side when you're trying to set up, oh, I need a Wrath effect for Guide Pride start. And then your opponent goes a Johnny Bombardment. You're like, oh, well, I just lose to that. Or I need to interact with the creatures on board. The arena flayed you from the graveyard.
I was just about to bring that up. It's like, even if you go, there's so many angles of attack that the deck has is a little bit inconspicuous at first, where it's like, oh, they're just a creature deck. Like all these sweepers should be good. But Goblin Bombardment does a fantastic job of blanking sweepers, and then Flage being a threat from the graveyard that you can haste thanks to Arena of Glory. There are too many axes of attacks for this deck to fold to one single hate piece. And that's another reason why it remains one of the most resilient and consistent decks in the format, is because of all these multiple axes of attacks.
And I guess I guess for a new player coming into the new modern RCQ season, this might be probably a top tier deck to pick up due to the fact that you can't really mess up or stumble with the deck.
Yeah, and actually, like one thing I actually really enjoy about Boros existing in the format is if you've never played Boros before, you can do pretty well with it. And if you have 2 years of experience with Boros, it really rewards that knowledge and persistence with the strategy. I think it's actually quite a high skill ceiling deck. It doesn't feel like it when your opponent goes triple Guide of Souls, right? But sometimes like the sequencing and choices in the deck really matter too.
Cool.
Yeah, if you want to talk about difficulty of the list, I would say like the difficulty of Boros Energy on a scale of 1 to 10. Should we add this to the tier list as well?
Let's do it. I like that idea. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would give Boros like a 3 out of 10 in terms of difficulty. Once you figure out how to sequence your Ragavan, your Ocelot Pride, and your Guide of Souls, and kind of assemble your sequence of the first 3 turns where it's like, I want to deploy this 1-drop, and then maybe I want to play a Voice of Victory, or I play another 1-drop. Like, I don't really think the deck is too difficult. There are important decisions to make with the deck, but I would say it's pretty straightforward, pretty simple. If you watch a video or 2 about it, you should be able to pick up the deck no problem.
Cool.
I would second that statement all day long. Like I think the deck is it's kind of got that feel of old school Burn, where if your game plan is just throw burn spells at your opponent's face and get them down from 20, then it's kind of autopilot. But if you want to squeak out some of those extra percentage points against some of the combo decks, or when things are a little more interactive, there are some decision points that you can change up, like the 1-drops on turn 1 on play versus draw, or whether you're going in on something like Voice of Victory or playing a tap land, whatever the case may be. It's like some minor decisions here and there, but for the most part, even if you make the incorrect decision, the deck doesn't punish poor play that much or at all half the time.
So I think this deck is firmly S tier then. Sam, you mentioned a deck during this, similar hate that you could bring in, Wrath of Skies and stuff for Boros Energy, which is Affinity. And Affinity is I think the 3rd most played deck currently in Modern. It got a lot of interest from the previous Modern Pro Tour with the makeshift munitions sort of tech and all that. Not makeshift. Is it makeshift munitions tech?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Manufacturing.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah. So, Sam, Affinity. What is Affinity trying to do? What is the deck?
Well, this will hopefully come to surprise of no one. It has taken advantage of that affinity mechanic, kind of. Well, not really anymore, actually. Yeah. It's a hard one. Let me explain it. So Affinity of old used to be like the whole Arcbound Ravager, Mox Opal type thing.
Mhm.
Honestly, like when Mox Opal got unbanned, that took a lot of people by surprise. A lot of people weren't expecting that one. And then it took a little while for Mox Opal to actually kick off, but it was, as we've already touched upon, the weapons manufacturing in Edge of Eternities that has essentially really tipped this deck over the edge with a hidden little all-star from One Horizon 3, which is Kappa Cannoneer. So basically,
Legacy All
what
Star.
this deck wants to do, Legacy or Commander All-Star for any Commander players out there, but what this deck wants to do is it wants a sort of pile of artifacts to be able to support itself. That comes with a Pinnacle Emissary to make more artifact tokens. It comes with weapons manufacturing to make the munitions tokens. And then finally, Kappa Cannoneer helps you cheat into play through that improvisability. The deck essentially wants to put a very large creature into play very, very quickly as soon as turn one in some instances. But it then also has like this backup mid-range grindy plan with cards like Urza Saga, recently printed cards like Skateboard to help cheat the Kappa Cannoneer through or other threats through. And even now has sort of a combo finish with those munitions tokens. And some lists have even started putting Emery in the main deck again. So this is basically a hyper aggressive combo deck almost. I think I'll see what Mikey and Dingo think of that statement. But basically wants a lot of artifacts in play and does very, very silly things with those artifacts.
I let off
have a
on
hot take.
Boros, so
All right, yeah, we'll swap back and forth. How about that?
deal.
I have a hot take on Affinity.
Okay.
I think it's the best deck in the format.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And the reason why I think that Affinity is the best deck in the format is because it has straight up unbeatable draws. If you draw the tools to put a turn 1 Kappa Cannoneer into play with Pinnacle Emissary tokens, you are never losing that game. It does not matter what your opponent has, you will not lose that game. Very few decks are able to beat Affinity's best draws. However, with the printing of Skateboard and Urza Saga just being a broken land in general, this deck does not need its broken turn ones to win the game. You have so much inevitability and grind with Urza Saga, and they also play counter spells. They play Metallic Rebuke and they play Thoughtcast and Krang now, which just came out in TMNT. This deck got a lot more resilient, even when it doesn't have its pinnacle draw, no pun intended. It doesn't have its pinnacle draw of like turn 1 Kappa Cannoneer with, I don't know, Force and Negation backup because we're just like, we're so baller that we have 8 cards in hand turn 1, right? So I would say with that in mind, and also weapons manufacturing plus engineered explosives or claws of Gix being an alternate plan where you just burn your opponent out with 10 munitions tokens eventually. This deck, while being a dog to Wrath of the Skies, has such a linear game plan that even if your opponent has Wrath of the Skies, if you stick a Kappa Cannoneer before that Wrath comes down, you're going to win. Or if you just make enough munitions tokens before the Wrath comes down, you're also going to win because your opponent can't even Wrath you because they're going to die if they Wrath you. And with that in mind, plus the counter magic from Metallic Rebuke, I would put it as S+ tier. I think it's the best deck in the format.
Wow.
And it's got access to a lot of powerful sideboard cards in the colors of blue and red. Also, you can even pivot and be like an Emery plus Sewer Cam build with Grinding Station and go more that route now that, you know, TMNT gave us so many wonderful artifacts to add to Affinity. S+ for me.
Okay. Wow. Mikey?
Very high praise. I don't hate the call out of Affinity being the best deck in the format. I don't think I'm quite there on the deck. I do think it's extraordinarily good, and I agree that it's got some draws that nobody in the format's beating. Thankfully, those draws don't come up too terribly often. They're not uncommon by any means, because like Pinnacle Emissary is a messed up card.
Yeah, it's really good.
When you're able to turn 1 Pinnacle Emissary into Opal, a couple other 0 drops, like even if you don't Kappa, it's very easy to set up turn 2 Krang or just Metallic Rebuke a couple turns and hit your opponent in the face with drone tokens, whatever the case may
Which is
be.
something like 4 or 5
Um,
power on board in turn 1, I guess, as well.
Yeah. Like it's got very, very good backup draws, which can be taken advantage of with stuff like Pest Control or Wrath of Skies, whatever the case may be, which is the only reason that I would even consider putting it below the best deck in the format.
Okay.
Urza's Saga is a messed up, stupid card that I hate with a
I also hate
passion.
that card.
I feel like with Mystical Dispute and Subtlety and Counterspell and stuff like that, I rarely find myself losing to Kappa Cannoneer, but just Saga making like 2 8/8 constructs or something off of a land drop is absolutely nuts. And the rules changed to allow it to live through Blood Moon, Harbinger of the Seas, whatever the case, is a huge boon to that deck.
Yes.
The only reason I think that I would not put I'm definitely in the S tier on Affinity camp.
Okay.
The only reason I would not put it is like the top deck outside of some of the non-nut draws do have some vulnerabilities. And if you don't see like a Pinnacle Emissary or Weapons Manufacturing, the starts can be fairly normal. But Mox Opal availability. The card's like more than Prime Tarmogoyf at its peak right now per
Yeah.
copy. And I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy to have to go out and find 4 Mox Opals last minute to enter an event. So I have to knock it down at least like part of the way just for that. So I put it solid S. I would put it above Boros as like a more powerful, more broken deck. Just every now and then it's going to have some slight inconsistencies where you don't see one of your 8 Pinnacle Emissary effects or whatever, or don't see Saga into second Saga into third Saga and you lose because your RNG just wasn't good enough for that event. But yeah, I'm saying S tier as well. I've got a pick that I would put above Affinity that I will save until we get to that point.
You got anything to add on this, Sam?
Yeah, I think that I keep talking about Modern Evolved, but Affinity is one of the only decks in quotation marks that has existed since the beginning of Modern, and some iteration of it exists now. One thing that I think Affinity really has going for it that it didn't before is it used to just be get Stony Silence in play, and that was essentially lights out. The deck just does not operate like that anymore.
No.
It's actually really funny. I've been testing one of these decks, which we'll touch upon later, but I played Hercule's Recall in that deck sideboard to try it out against the Affinity matchup. You either don't want to Hercule's Recall, as Dingo mentioned before. If you Wrath, Pest Control, Hercule's Recall when they have 10 munitions in play, you can just die. But the issue with a card like Hercule's Recall, which used to be one of the premier hate spells for an artifact strategy, is that with cards like Kappa and Pinnacle Emissary, they just do the same thing the next turn. Like it bounces to the hand, they do the same loop, and it comes back. And it started to play almost like Boros in a little bit, because it has so many different axes of that attack. Can you beat the Kappa? Unlikely, as we discussed. But if you can you beat these 10 munitions tokens? Oh, well, if you can beat that, can you actually beat this Urza Saga as well? And this Krang, and I'm drawing cards. The deck actually fights on a pretty nasty axis, to be honest. And I think it definitely belongs in that S tier category. And it's really funny because I don't disagree with anyone. I think it's probably the best deck in the format, and it probably isn't at the same time. It's Schrodinger's Kappa Cannoneer, right? It's like, I really like the point that I think to wrap up Affinity, the best point is you cannot beat those nut draws. Like, you just can't do it. You can, but it's 0.1% of the time. And if you can find a playset of Mox Opals without, remortgaging your house, I think it's a fantastic choice.
Difficulty rating?
Yeah, no, I would say personally that the difficulty rating of Affinity is either a 4 or 5 out of 10. I think it is a little bit harder than Energy in the sense that you have to decide what turn you want to deploy all your artifacts from hand. Do you want to wait for Pinnacle Emissary? If you have 2 Pinnacle Emissaries, do you go Pinnacle Emissary and then deploy all your artifacts on turn 1, or do you wait until turn 2 and go Pinnacle Emissary, Pinnacle Emissary? Do you wait until you deploy your weapons manufacturing and then play all your artifacts? It's kind of tricky. Also, this deck mulligans very poorly. And I think that's the biggest weakness of Affinity, is that it's a critical mass deck. It requires you to have a lot of pieces in your hand. So the mulliganing decisions in Affinity are not easy.
I would agree with that. Like, I've had plenty of games against Affinity where they tank for 2 minutes on their keep, play a Mox Opal, force negation it, and they scoop the game. It's like, oh, I had to have all this stuff. You stop my only piece of mana, and I can't win from here. As far as difficulty of playing the deck, I definitely agree that it's not as just cast stuff on curve as Boros. There is some thought involved. The hands that just do the thing, like you have Pinnacle Emissary on 1 and Box Opal and a bunch of free artifacts, I think those hands play themselves. Hands with like Metallic Rebuke held up on turn 1 kind of play themselves. Once you get past that, it's, oh, what am I tutoring up off of Saga? Has a little bit of variance here and there, or if my hand doesn't do the busted thing, how well am I doing making the backup plan function? So I think I agree with it being like around a 5.
I think that's very fair. Yeah, very fair.
Yeah, 5 sounds good to me.
So I'm going to stick Affinity in S tier. Would be above Boros Energy, but we can't because it's only goes so high.
Yeah.
Cool. So Sam, you mentioned before about decks that are have been represented through Modern of old. The old Tarmogoyf. The old Tarmogoyf Modern doesn't really exist anymore, but there's still remnants of the old Modern format or the old Modern identity before Modern Horizons. And I think one of those decks is actually Amulet Titan. So
now, look, I don't know how I've drawn the short straw to have to try and describe Amulet Titan.
Yeah,
I don't know how I've drawn that. Thanks for putting me in that seat, Josh. But you are right. Amulet Titan is, geez, when I first started playing Modern, I could not beat the Amulet Titan player at my FNM. That was 10 years ago. Well, it was Dragons of Tarkir period, original Dragons to put in some perspective. But yeah, that deck is definitely a remnant of old Modern. And essentially, we've just talked about how strong Urza Saga is. And Amulet is arguably, maybe a bit of discussion, but arguably the stronger Urza Saga deck because it uses it to fetch Amulet of Vigor. Amulet of Vigor, to cut it absolutely short and to make sure I don't embarrass myself and have it on YouTube forever. But Amulet of Vigor lets you do silly things with bounce lands. It lets you add the mana before you bounce the land. So basically, you get to add your 2 mana first and go off from there. So this deck used to be basically an all-in combo deck. I have Titan or I lose. And that deck is subtly and quite sneakily gained tools across Modern's lifespan. It's, there is that copy and paste. Amulet has remained tier 0 or 1 through metas like Hogak, whatever else. But it's recently got very interesting tools and very interesting lines due to Spelunking being a very good replacement for Amulet of Vigor or a second placer of. It also now plays elements like Aftermath Analyst, which is a massive upgrade for the deck. And to cut myself short, it basically all plays into a combo where you make Infinite Titans, but because you are doing stuff with your lands, it's actually quite difficult for your opponent to interrupt or interact with that strategy.
Yeah.
So Amulet Titan's strength, realistically, comes from you can't really interact with me style of play. It's a combo deck that very rarely uses the stack. I mean, obviously it does, but yeah, I think that Amulet, if you remember it, it's a very different shape and breed to what you actually remember from Modern's Once Gone.
Yeah.
But this deck is I have to say, I really like Amulet existing in the format. I think it's a very cool deck.
Blasphemy.
I'm going to pass it off to CntrlFreak to absolutely disagree with me.
I actually don't. I mentioned during the Affinity little segment there that I had another pick for what I would put is the best deck in the format, and it's Amulet Titan. There are some major caveats in my mind for this distinction, though. It's one of the best decks or the best deck in the format if you are willing to commit your soul to it and make a deal with the devil at the crossroads, whatever you can do to become one of these like half dozen Amulet Titan gods that roam through Magic Online. Like, I'm sure Dingo's had the displeasure of going up against Canister or House of Mana or Reed Q, Nathan of the Gilt Leaf,
Nathan,
whoever.
yeah.
Yeah, that just seem to summon these ungodly, otherworldly abilities to draw and navigate through Titan lines that you would never think were possible. So in the hands of someone like that, I think Amulet Titan is like S plus plus tier, miles above everything else. But for the average RCQ player, I would not pick up Amulet Titan in a million years.
No.
Like, you are doing yourself a disservice if you pick it up, because that deck is a 15 out of 10 on difficulty to eke out every last percentage point. You can go through some basic lines of just getting a Titan, hasting it up, hitting your opponent for 6, winning the next turn off of just multiple Titans, whatever the case may be. That's all great. That's fun. Whatever floats your boat. But if you want to like take down an RC or become a PT champ on Amulet Titan, you have got to just absolutely devote every
You've got to
second
see
of
the
your
matrix,
existence
haven't
to
you?
that deck. The win rate matrix.
You just got to see
No,
the
like the
you've got-
actual matrix.
You've got to
Oh,
see
yeah,
the matrix.
yeah.
You got to be
No,
like
you
Neo.
really do. Like, you've got lines tumbling down in front of you of all the possible lands you can get off of your Titan trigger and how they're going to get you to victory. So for me, I would put Titan S tier if you're one of those 6 people that can run the deck absurdly well. If you can't, like C tier if you're just picking the deck up for the weekend. So it's such a wide range that it can fall in. Maybe for the sake of the video, I'm going to assume that everybody thinking of picking up the deck has either played with it for fun or watched it before. So I'll say like B plus, just meet in the middle somewhere. But I would love to hear everybody else's thoughts.
For me, Titan is the last S tier deck on this list. But again, with what Mikey said, it comes at a caveat of you have to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people look at Titan, play against it, they don't really understand what's happening on the other side of the table. And a lot of people tend to misplay their interaction against Titan because they don't really understand where to interact. What is the best time, the most optimal time to be using your hate pieces against Titan? So I strongly, strongly recommend, if you want to beat Titan, suck up your pride, your glory, and make a deal with the devil. Play the deck yourself.
Yeah.
Even if you hate it, trust me when I say if you play the deck yourself and learn the basic lines, it becomes a lot more apparent where the points of interaction are.
Yeah.
And for that reason, I can't call it the best deck in the format. There are too many things to play around, and the deck is too hard for me to call it the best deck in the format. I would say when you're the Titan player and you're trying to play around cards like Surgical Extraction, Consign to Memory, Subtlety, Force and Negation, if you're trying to play around any of these cards that aren't just like a permanent on the table like a Blood Moon's very easy to play around. Something at instant speed where you don't exactly know what it is, the deck becomes infinitely times harder. It goes from a 15 out of 10 to a 42 out of 10. Like, it is ridiculous the amount of complexity you can get once you introduce Urza's Cave into your sequencing of like, I'm going to go Titan, grab an Urza's Cave. Now I can play around XYZ, but I still lose to ABC. It's too hard. Frankly, it's too hard. These Titan players that have been playing it since Summer Bloom and Hive Mind were in the format, they still don't play it perfectly to this day, even though they've been playing it for 10 years. And that's because the deck is just too hard to be super viable for the average player. I'm going to put it at the bottom of S, but I'm also doing that in the lens of you've mastered the list. You've mastered it, and you're still going to make mistakes. I think that's just inevitable. I don't think any Titan player can play 100% perfectly because it's not feasible.
So let's
for me, it's an S minus.
So let's
15 out of 10 difficulty.
Okay, so because of that, let's put it as say like I've just been playing standard for 2 months or two seasons. I don't own a modern deck, and I need to pick one up, and I'm using this tier list. I'm using
D tier, E tier, basement tier. Don't touch Amulet Titan.
Yeah, B for bait tier, because like you're gonna bait yourself into a lot of stress, a lot of heartache, and a lot of time that you're not going to be able to commit to the deck that you absolutely need to if you want to see results with it.
So are we happy with B tier? Because I actually quite like that rationale.
B for bait.
B for bait.
For bait tier.
B for bait tier.
What I will say...
How many...
Oh, go
Sorry,
on.
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, if you are against me round 1 and you've played standard for 2 months or 2 seasons or 10 years... please play Amulet Titan. I could do with like whatever percentage miracles I can get. I just wanted to touch upon a little bit that like we've spoken about like hate for Boros, hate for Affinity, and I think they're a really interesting crux of Amulet and something that's actually not brought up too often from what I've seen discussion wise is the deck is very obvious hate. Dampen Sphere, Blood Moon, Harbinger of the Seas, get them in, all that sort of stuff. But one thing I really like about Amulet Titan is if you know what you're doing and more importantly know the meta and what to play around from what sideboards, I think I actually get to play some of the best interaction in the format in both Beseiji, who endures, and Otawara.
Yeah.
Because if you play it properly, they are interaction spells that do not use a stack, which is like really important for fighting hate as a combo player. Knowing when and how to fight and bite against hate is bread and butter really, and comes with time. But if you're a good Amulet player and you sit on those Besages, not Awaras, I think your post cyborg games can, the win rates on those can go up quite a bit.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I guarantee everybody sitting here, everybody sitting at home watching this video has played against an Amulet player at some point or another that has resolved a Titan, gone to look through their deck and said the word oops.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be that person in your first event with Titan. Like you don't want to do that with cash or invites or whatever on the line. So if you don't know that you're not going to have those oops moments in real time, don't pick up the deck.
So I'm gonna move on now, lads, because we're actually gonna we need to we've got loads more decks to talk about and a lot more interesting ones, and this is a fantastic conversation. I really want to get into your minds more about other decks. But should we keep on the sort of combo train and talk about Ruby Storm? Ruby Storm is one of those really well played decks. I think it's number 3 on, maybe number 4 on MTG Goldfish right now, and it's you see it either doing really, really well, or you see actually crash and burn. Like we had the PT with what was
worst win rate
ever to like people spiking RCs with the deck and stuff. So Sam, what you are a combo player. I would say you're really good at combo decks. What is Ruby Storm? Tell me quickly what Ruby Storm is.
Wizards of the Coast design team have something called the Storm Scale. It's mechanics they never want to do again. Storm is the Storm Scale, basically. It wants to cast a lot of instants and sorceries and spells, because then when you cast your spell with Storm, it copies for each of a spell you've cast this turn. So it basically, thanks to Modern Horizons 3, has ways to reduce the spell cost. So both Ral and Ruby Medallion, you play a bunch of rituals, you play your Past in Flames, you play your rituals again. By this point, your Ral's flipped, it's on 34 loyalty, you wish for Grape Shot, and you just basically critical mass, spells in the stack. I'm going to copy my Grape Shot 24 times and deal 24 damage to you.
So take over to you, Dingo. No, that was super fast. It was almost like a Storm player going off fast.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I think this deck's really good, but it's one of those decks of, are you feeling lucky, punk? because if you lose one crucial Rao flip, that could be the entire match. If you flip the wrong 2 cards off of a Reckless Impulse and you hit land, and suddenly you brick and you fizzle and you can't go off, that's the match.
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
Storm is very, very difficult. I would put it at like an 8 out of 10 in terms of difficulty,
Mhm.
but I also think it's really powerful if you maximize your chances of not fizzling. Pretty much, you got to wait as long as possible before playing your reducer, so that way it doesn't get hit by like prismatic ending or whatever hate piece that or whatever answer your opponent has. So you have to pick your spot for the reducer and also maximize your chance of not fizzling in the same turn. And I think picking your spot is the hardest part about Storm. Sequencing the spells, not that bad, but for me, this is an A tier deck.
Okay.
I think that's a very fair breakdown. Like, most people watching this probably don't know that Dingo crushed me on Storm at RC Charlotte on the way to a Pro Tour invite. So I have a little bit of disdain for the deck in the back of my soul. I do think that it is an extremely good deck. I think that game 1, it's a 4 out of 10 difficulty because most of the format has no meaningful way of interacting. You're really a game 1 deck. Games 2 and 3, it's 8, 9 difficulty once you start figuring out what you need to play around high noons, damping spheres, surgical extraction, whatever the case may be. But you do have some tools to fight over that, and you can always have access to cards like Wish if you realize you didn't bring in the right tool and against some hate pieces. So I would definitely put it A tier as well. I definitely don't think it's as good as those big 3 decks, but the fact that you're a very good game 1 deck means a lot of times you can just catch a room unprepared. They didn't bring the right pieces of hate against you, and you stormed over some people.
So I guess it's the high power sort of mid consistency sort of brings the deck down. Would you agree with that sort of statement?
Yeah, I
I'd
would say
say
like
Storm's like, sorry, go ahead.
I was just say Storm's biggest enemy is itself. Like, most of the time Storm players lose is because they fizzle.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, you draw, you see 10 extra cards, you don't see a reducer, you die, or you really need those Rin's Resolves to hit some sort of live spell, and it's just land, and you lose. There's nothing you can do about that. So yeah, I 100% agree. Biggest enemy is itself.
I think I want to add a little caveat, see if the table agrees with me. But I think that Storm is the best deck, or a really strong deck when it's not the best deck in the room, if that makes sense. The more high noons and hate people have in their sideboard, the harder your rounds are going to be realistically. So if Storm's won 5 challenges in a row and it's top 8'd 30 challenges in a row, it might not actually be the best time for Storm, ironically enough, because more people are likely to be prepared for it. Unlike the other combo decks that we've discussed and are going to discuss, Storm literally has no plan B. There, unless Rao beats get you there, I guess.
Yeah.
But Storm finds it very difficult to win without doing the thing. Near impossible to win without doing the thing. So I think there's a caveat of, if the room is super prepared for Storm, it might be a harder RCQ than just playing something like Boros. I'm not sure what the table think of that.
I would agree with that, but I would also say like Storm is probably the deck that has the most polarizing matchups, because if you play against Energy and Titan, you're gonna feel great. If you play against Blue-White Control and Blue-Black Frog, you're gonna hate everything. You're just gonna have a terrible time. There's so many more points of interaction coming out of the blue decks. Even Affinity's got a lot of points of interaction for you. Whereas if you're playing against like another linear ships passing in the night deck, whether it be Energy or Titan, it's a lot easier to navigate the games and do well.
Yeah.
Cool. So we're happy with the A tier on that.
Yeah.
A
Yep.
tier there, and 8 out of 10 difficulty. I think I think you, Dingo, said
Yeah, I would say like 7. I'll split the difference and call it a 7 out of 10.
7 out of 10. Would probably not recommend for your first RC season or modern season, but it's more viable than say Titan if you want to go the combo route.
Yeah, definitely easier to pick up than Titan.
Cool. Should we keep on the combo sort of stuff? Make this segment a little easier for people. interested in combo? Because
Let's do
Sam,
it.
I've got a combo deck that you love.
I hope it's the one I think you're gonna ask me to talk about.
Yeah, so Sam, can you tell me about Belchure, please?
Yes. So Belcher is a very interesting combo deck. It operates on a very cool axis. As we've talked about for most decks, they operate on quite interesting axes at the moment. Well, Belcher, rather than an all-in combo deck like Storm, it's an all-in combo deck as a control strategy first.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than putting 50 spells in a stack in the same turn, Belcher's looking to counter your opponent's spells on their turn as a priority.
Mhm.
And then essentially, the way you get to win with Belcher is Belcher's a 4-mana artifact. You pay for it, you activate it, you reveal cards from top of your library until you hit a land and deal that much damage to your opponent. What Belcher does is it only plays MDFCs.
Mhm.
So those double-sided lands we've seen in Monhan's Free and in Zendikar Rising, I think, or one of
Yeah,
the
that's-
Zendikar
yeah.
blocks. Yeah. So basically all your lands are spells. So you get to play cards like Disrupt and Shoal, which you can pitch your lands to counter spells on your opponent's turn. You get to play cards like Flare Denial and both Thundertrap Trainer and Philology Archaeologist. And rather than trying to win on very aggressively with a deck like Storm or all in one turn, you are trying to wear down your opponent's resources until you can combo, get a Belcher to do it instantly, essentially. If a Belcher resolves and it's activated, you're likely at the game. But it plays like this Word of Invention Tameshi Lotus Bloom as its unfair package to sort of put it into the option of modern. Belcher's a deck that's actually very, very close to my heart. There's nothing like firing a cannon at your opponent, I've got to be honest. Like, you don't chip away, you deal 40. It's a really cool feeling. But yeah, Belcher is a very cool deck, and I actually think it's in quite a strange place at the moment.
Go on then, Mike. Let's say what you think on this one.
Fair enough. I got a little bit of mixed feelings about Belcher. I think the deck is really cool. I've seen it. I've watched a few people play it from the Belcher side, and the games you lose bad. It's things like you find a bunch of free counter spells, but you're not finding lands to play, and you don't have Lotus Bloom turn 1, so you're waiting until like turn 5 to suspend your Lotus Bloom, and you can't get ahead. You can't get a clear board. You're being pressured too much. Consigned to Memory is one of the most played cards, if not still the most played card in Modern. And everybody has got 4 coming out of their sideboard. That card gives you nightmares. I think that if you're good with like threat assessment, Belcher's pretty good. Or if you're good at recognizing what kind of hate pieces are coming in against you. But Belcher does not do a very good job of like throttling pressure. So if your game plan of going off turn 4 either isn't fast enough or your opponent's doing something disruptive as well as providing some sort of creature attacking you, that deck can struggle a lot at catching back up if you start falling behind. So I think Belcher's good, but I would put it pretty high on the difficulty scale for a kind of low-ish mid payoff. So like low B tier for me personally, difficulty in like the 7 to 8 range,
Okay.
maybe borderline C plus tier, just kind of depends on what hate's coming in. I don't hate the deck. I just think that every match is like a slog for you, and there's a very good chance that you just run into Affinity. Was it like Affinity and Prowess and Storm and just like these
Yeah.
faster decks, and you don't threaten anything until at least turn 4. So you're always on the back foot the first like 3 turns, regardless of the matchup.
I think Belcher is a very, very deceptively hard deck. It doesn't look hard when you play against it because they're just like, oh, War for my Lotus. I got 7 mana. Belcher with Flare of Denial backup and Activated kill you. But every single one of your decisions matters in Belchers, including how you sequence your land drops, which may seem unassuming, but the card Disrupting Shoal means that you have to figure out exactly what hate pieces you are going to have to fight against, and then keep one of your MDFC lands in hand that has the equal mana cost to it to be able to pitch it to Disrupting Shoal. I see a lot of people missequence their lands with Belcher and then not have the correct CMC card to pitch the Disrupting Shoal because they don't really think about how they sequence their lands that deeply. But I also think that Belcher gains an edge somewhere in that its artifact enchantment destruction is not very good against Belcher, mostly because of Whir. If they suspend a Lotus and like they bring it off on upkeep and you go to kill that Lotus and they have a Whir in their hand, they can crack it for 3 blue and then Whir for a new Lotus, and it's like you never even had that removal spell.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a free counter spell in a sense, and it makes it very frustrating if you're a deck like Boros Energy that your only real points of interaction most of the time are like Wear Tear or like most of the artifact destruction effects that you have. So I think Belcher is very highly matchup dependent because I don't think you're ever really beating something like Affinity or something like Tron, who can play 4 Vexing Baubles and Karn and Trinisphere and whatever. Like, I think that your matchups as Belcher are very polarizing, but I also think the deck's really hard. I give it like an 8 out of 10 in difficulty. I don't know how to assess it right now because I think it's very strong into energy and very strong into storm, but it has a lot of weaker matchups as well. So I'd probably agree with Mikey, and then I would put it below Titan in B. But honestly, I think Titan belongs in S, but for the sake of this tier list, we'll put it below Titan in B.
Yeah.
Same.
I
It's
feel-
definitely got a lot of similar feels to Titan, where like if you know Belcher and you know your matchups and you know your sequencing, then it's got a very high ceiling. I don't think the ceiling's like as high as Boros Affinity Titan, but if you don't know it, if you're just picking the deck up on a whim and trying to jam some games for an RCQ, you're going to have a very tough time being efficient and making as many correct decisions, and they are punishing.
Yeah,
I agree.
it's really got that oh no factor, like we mentioned with Titan. Oh no, I actually shouldn't have played this Bane Veil because now I'm going to lose to this too. It's like it's the only deck I've played where it forces you to think out both players' turns 4 turns in advance. It's really, I genuinely adore the deck, but I think a B placement is very, very fair. And honestly, after we've spoken difficulty, I feel a lot smarter than I did when we started this pod. So I will take that as a win as well.
So we've got B for Belcher in this instance.
B for bait, B for Belcher.
Bait, Belcher, and bait. Yeah, I think it's one of those meta call decks, right? It has
Yes,
to be.
I think so.
But like we had this conversation check out the last pod episode if you haven't already, people listening, because we had a really good conversation with Archdota and we talked about combo, and there's a really funny quip with that Sam told us with his Belcher experience.
Oh yeah,
and we're not going to talk about it now because we talked about
No.
in the last one. You need to go check out.
Yeah.
But let's keep on the combo train for one more combo deck, which is Neobrand, another one of Sam's favorites. It seems to be like the combo space in Modern needs to be decided on the fact of what you're expecting to see hate-wise within the format. Say, for example, we're seeing lots of High Noons and Rest in Pieces, then you might not want to pick Storm. You see a lot of Consigned to Memories and blue decks. You might not want to necessarily pick into Belcher, for example, or Eldrazi decks, for example. You might pick into Belcher. I don't know, but there's a plethora of if you want to go into this RCQ format with modern combo deck, then you've got a lot to choose from. So Neobrand is, I think, the last combo deck we're going to talk about. Yeah, I believe it is. Sam, what is this deck trying to do?
So Neobrand, or locally we call it Dino Stompy because it's the same thing, to be honest. But essentially, Neobrand takes advantage of a card called Neoform. It's a green and a blue sorcery, sack a creature, and you go get a creature that's 1 CMC more than it. It's a one-shot Birthing Pod effect. And basically, it takes abuse of that with Allosaurus Rider. Allosaurus Rider is a 7-mana creature you get to cast by exiling 2 green spells from your hand. So basically, you get an Allosaurus Rider and play for free, and then you neoform it into a Gristlebrand or into another 8-mana threat, and you can get a Gristlebrand in play on turn 2. You can there's even lines in the deck with the newest Gouter from Caverns of Ixalan and Xenagos where you can win the game on turn 2, like flat out take 26. I have a hot take about Neobrand. I currently think it's the strongest deck in Modern in a vacuum. We discussed with Affinity that those nut draws from Affinity are near unbeatable. I think Neobrand Neoform also boasts that. Because you play cover cards like Pact of Negation and you're quite a consistent combo deck. Against popular belief, I think this deck's a really good choice. I'm about to be humbled. I know I'm about, but I am saying out loud that I personally adore this deck, and I think it's actually quite well positioned at the moment.
So Dingo's over to you.
So I think this deck is another one like Storm where the difficulty of this deck and how good it is really depends on what your matchups are. If you play against Energy, this deck's like a 2 out of 10 difficulty. The deck plays itself. You just kill your opponent. There's nothing they can do about it, especially game 1. Game 2, game 3, things get a little harder against a deck like Energy. But where this deck really becomes like a 7 out of 10 difficulty is when you have to play against any blue deck. Anytime you have to think about Force Negation and Subtlety, Mystical Dispute, Spell Snare, it's so the mental load is so overwhelming, and you also have to be able to beat cards like Vexing Bauble as well. And there's so many like neat little tricks that Neoform has where you can like Veil a Summer to be able to cast your Allosaurus Rider through a Vexing Bauble, or you can consign to memory the Vexing Bauble trigger to prevent your spell from being countered by Vexing Bauble. There's so many small little niche interactions that you need to learn with the deck that I think I cannot call this deck an easy deck to pick up for an RCQ season, and I would highly recommend getting reps on it. But I also don't even think the deck's that powerful because it's so glass cannony. While I do think in a perfect world where your opponent is not interacting with you and your hands are very good, the deck feels insane. But I think this deck is a lot less resilient than something like Affinity. A lot of these Neoform lists have been pivoting over to a plan B of Ice Fang Coatl plus Oculus to Neoform into, which I think is like kind of funny, but at the same time, I'm like, this it can't be powerful enough of a plan B to be worth it. So in my opinion, I would put Neoform at C tier. I don't think it's better than any of the other combo decks on the list right now. And I think it's a lot more heartache for a lot more potential to just not play the game if your opponent has certain interaction for you.
Yeah, I know Dingo compared Neoform to Storm. I really compared Neoform to like Belchure, where you've got high highs and low lows, but it's even like higher highs and even lower lows. Like I know myself and all of my Demir X brethren are just like the sleep paralysis demons for Neoform players everywhere.
Yeah.
Like I salivate over that matchup because I think I could just click random buttons and win through that one. Neoform in a vacuum is really cool, really sweet, but we don't live in a vacuum, unfortunately. So like high noon wrecks your days. If you lose a stack war, you just lose the game on the spot. You can never recoup. The backup plan, like Dingo mentioned, the Ice Fang Oculus plan, it kind of sucks. Like, let's be real. You're not hard casting your Oculus. You have to Neoform an Ice Fang Coatl, but you had to pay 2 mana for your Ice Fang Coatl. And it's just not where you want to be when your opponent is getting to do their thing because you're not interacting with them at all. Your only point of interaction is like Pact of Negation something and hope to consign my Pact trigger, but I'm not doing that on a Ragavan on turn 1 or a Blood Moon on turn 3
Yeah.
because I just can't win afterwards. So I agree that like playing Neoform through the hate pieces is very difficult. I agree as well that there's a lot of like niche interactions that you need to be aware of. But I also agree that what's the payoff for learning all of those niche interactions? Like you still just lose kind of to a deck just doing a general gameplay, and your opponent plays a Teferi Time Raveler and you lose on the spot, or they play a Vexing Bauble and you don't see the consign to memory and you lose. You draw your Allosaurus Rider and just don't see enough green cards and you lose. And a lot of that's just out of your control sometimes.
So we have a real time example of this sort of you know, really high ceiling, really low floor kind of thing. So Jack Goldsworthy, who's the team captain for Chad Magic, he took this deck into the Axion Now Invitational. He top 8'd with the deck, yeah, the PTQ, yeah. So he top 8'd. It was a big tournament, wasn't it, Sam? It was like 100 odd players.
So the actual PTQ is like 42 players, but they had to do really well in 150 plus player events to qualify for the PTQ.
It's a big tournament. So he took, you know, he analyzed the data, said there's going to be lots of boss energy. This deck is going to be really good into this meta. Got to top 8. Out of the 8 decks, out of the 7 other decks in the top 8, he needed to not see one of them. And in the quarters, he saw that one deck. I think it was blue-white control. Like any other deck, he was like favored for, but he had to not see that deck, and he saw that deck, and then just like couldn't do anything, crumbled instantly.
Yeah.
I have a little bit of an anecdote about this deck as well, because I actually played that deck Neoform in the last Modern Pro Tour, and I was expecting a lot of energy. I was expecting a lot of like non-interactive decks, and then when the meta breakdown came out, I saw Belchers and Gorios as the 2 most played decks, and my heart just sank. I was like, I'm never beating this Belcher deck. I'm never beating Gorios very easily. Like, I had a match against Gorios where I set myself up. I had a Gristlebrand, but I had to pay for a green pact and upkeep. I had the consign to memory, and then my opponent just, like, plays it to Fairy, and I'm like, okay, I'll draw 7. If I don't draw Pact and Negation, I'm going to lose. Whiffed on the Pact and Negation. I was like, okay, I just lost to 1 Teferi Time Raveler. Even though I have a Gristlebrand in play, I feel like I was set up super well. Like, I don't know. The deck is too... it's got, as you mentioned, high highs and really low lows.
So
I've had games against Neoform where, like, they would go for the Neoform, I'd force negation, they'd pact a negation, I'd counter spell, they'd second pact. I'm like, all right, that's cool. Gristlebrand, draw 7, pass. Well, I pass back. Well, I got to replicate consign to not die. Cool. I replicate my consign your consign trigger, and you just lose. Like, it's just over.
Consign
you did
your
all
consign
that work,
trigger.
you had all the stuff,
Brilliant.
and you still lost because couldn't do anything.
Brilliant. So we're placing this. Sam, this is an S tier for you, but unfortunately, you're not the experts that we invited onto the podcast. So are we saying C tier for this?
That's what I would put it. Yeah.
Cool. So you actually mentioned Gorio's Vengeance before, and this is on the list. So let's talk about one of my favorite decks in Modern right now, because it's a frog deck first and foremost, or maybe not first and foremost, but it's a frog deck, which is Gorio's Vengeance. Sam, what is Gorio's Vengeance trying to do?
I'm kind of bummed out after the Neoform conversation, to be honest. I don't know. So, unlike the superior strategy of Neoform, what Gorio's Vengeance is trying to do is basically get a large legendary creature into the graveyard, and then like Gristlebrand or Atraxa as your primary targets. And then Gorio's Vengeance is a 2-mana instant. It puts a legendary creature from your bin into play. It gains haste, and then at the end of your turn, it's exiled. So, very interestingly enough, this deck has also existed for a very long time. It used to try and cheat Obsidat the Ghost Council into play, and then abuse the Flicker trigger and the Obsidat. It's well gone now, but that's very, very cool. But with Atraxa and Gristlebrand, Atraxa is actually, Josh, I'm not sure if you disagree with me here, but Atraxa is almost turned into the primary target for Gorios because of the Ephemerate interaction. Yes. Atraxa finds Ephemerate to Atraxa. and you basically get to keep the new Atraxa because it's a new permanent. So you look at the next 10, and then it's not exile the end of turn. And then that's the combo, but it plays this Esper mid-range style of game. It's got Quantum Riddlers, it's got Solitudes, it's got cards like Faithless Mending to dig through the deck and discard cards. It's got cards like Psychic Frog to be a mid-range threat that also discards cards. Gorio's it's very cool that it exists. It's heartbreaking that it doesn't play Obstat anymore. But I think one thing we've not discussed so far is it's a really strong 40s deck.
Yeah.
And when we've seen all of the combo decks that we've just been through, I think Gorio's is actually, as always, pretty fair choice.
I think it's over to you first, Mike.
It's my turn. So yeah, I think that for me, Gorio's is definitely A tier. I think it's a very solid, proactive game plan. Game one, your backup plan is pretty good. The reason I don't put Gorio's in like S tier, or I would even go ahead and spoil that I put it below the redheaded cousin Jesky Blink. The reason I put the deck lower than those is the backup plan is not great. It's not as solid. Like warping a Riddler, ephemerating it is really cool. It's not the most powerful thing you can be doing without other cards like Casey Jones or Flage or whatever that red gives you, or Fable the Mirror Breaker, Ragavan backup options. Hard casting Atraxa is a legal play that you can make in Modern. It's probably not the most ideal use of Atraxa. But the real reason that I have the Gorio's deck a little bit lower is, in my mind, if you're signing up for like a big event, let's say you got a 7-round RCQ, whatever the case is, I don't think you can win that event if you don't have access to the unfair aspect of Gorio's.
Yeah.
So if you don't have games where you go frog into discard Gorio's, or surveil into turn, flip over an Atraxa, untap Gorio's it. If your opponent takes your graveyard out of the equation, you have a backup plan, but I don't think that backup plan is good enough to actually win events. So I put it a little bit lower on my rating because of that. I think the backup plan is good. I just don't think it's good enough to be like an A plus tier or S tier deck.
Yeah.
Compared to like Jesky Blink, whose backup plan I think is just exponentially better when a lot of these resources are cut off. So A for me, difficulties like an 8, maybe even a 9. It's a really tough deck to play optimally, especially when you're trying to play around things like force negation or worse, surgical extraction. Again, I just don't think that like playing around that stuff, you're putting yourself in a position to necessarily win. You're just kind of putting yourself in a position to prolong whatever game you're in.
Yes.
I would actually argue that Gorio's is worse than A tier. I think that Gorio's is probably, out of all the decks on this list, the most inconsistent deck. I've had just some horrendous looking opening sevens with Gorio's. I'm sitting there with like a subtlety, a solitude, an ephemerate, and just like no other white cards. I got a Gorio's in my hand. I'm just like, this hand, it does not look keepable in the slightest. And I think that's a big problem that Gorio suffers from, is that it's so inconsistent because you're trying to mash all of these free spells into your deck that you need a white card for Solitude, you need a blue card for Force Negation, you need a blue card for Subtlety, whatever it may be, that I think with the more free elementals and free spells that you're putting in the deck, the less consistent it gets. And also, I don't even think it's the best graveyard deck on this list because Living End's right there.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to have to pick a graveyard deck to play between Gorio's and Living End, this is actually a question I got on the stream the other day. Hey, Dingo, if you had to choose either Gorio's or Living End to play in a big Modern tournament tomorrow, what would you choose? And I think I would not change my answer from when I said it a few days ago. I would play Living End because it is just a faster, more consistent, more powerful graveyard deck than Gorio's. And like Mikey said, Gorio's is a terrible backup plan. Your backup plan is Riddler Ephemerate and cast a Psychic Frog. And I just don't think that's good enough to keep up with a lot of the other decks in the format. So for me personally, I would put Gorio's at C tier.
Okay.
But I also think it's like a 6 out of 10 to play. I don't think it's quite as hard as an 8 or a 9, like you mentioned, but I would put it at C tier and give it a 6 out of 10 difficulty.
So I'm actually gonna put my 2 cents. I love this deck. Like this is I've smashed this. I smashed this deck, but I was playing it. My most success was it when it was more in on the combo plan. So Phalange Archaeologist, Ephemerate that, Turbo Mill everything into your deck, and then casting the get Gorio's Vengeance out, and it's very focused on the combo side. And I think the introduction of Quantum Riddler has given it this secondary game plan where you can, cast loads of free spells and then almost reload your hand, and then you've got that turn 3, ephemerated Quantum Riddler and stuff. And I actually found my win rate actually went down because of that. Now I know there's a Gorio's player online, RVNG I think his name is, who's still full on the combo plan for large archaeologists. Fill your bin as much as possible, and then not really on the combo plan, because you're quite right, Mike. This deck, to me, this deck has 3 roles, and they do 3 roles okay, mid to poor, which is a control role, a mid-range role, and a combo role. And I think the skill from this deck comes in which one of those roles are you playing at that moment, and maximize those roles within that situation. And I think that's where you see a lot of Gorio's Vengeance players doing really well in challenges, and why they don't put the deck down, like people like me. I just don't put it down because it's a Psychic Frog deck and I just want to play that card forever. But yeah, I do actually agree with a lot of what you're saying. It's a diehard deck that rewards you knowing what sort of game you're playing at, but identifying the fact that if I'm playing a mid-range strategy against Jesky Blink, I ain't winning that game.
You know what that C stands for, Josh? Copium.
Copium.
Both Neobrand and Gorios, quite ironically, have fallen into the same category of copium class, which I can live with.
Sure. So are we going for C tier?
I think we can split the difference and put it in B tier.
B, like bottom. I'd be okay with bottom of B tier. I agree that the deck has got a very big inconsistency issue. Like I've played it in a couple challenges, played it in some leagues, and you definitely have those hands that are just like, oh, double Atraxa to fairy, a couple lands, and like a prismatic ending, and you're like, oh well, this does literal nothing into 90% of the format. And then sometimes you have those hands of like frog to fairy, solitude ephemerate, and you're like, okay, well, maybe this is a mid-range deck, and then you draw 3 Atraxas and no Gorios off the top, and you're like, never mind, I got B for baited.
Do you know what card I've lost to most with this deck more than anything? Blood Moon. Oh my.
Yeah. It has a big Blood Moon problem, being like a 3.5 color deck.
Yeah. So we'll talk Living End then, because Living End came up on sort of Graveyard Ilk. I do want to talk about Jesky Blink after that. So we'll talk about Living End now, since it came up in the last conversation. Sam, what is Living End trying to accomplish?
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to process that I'm currently the only person in the copium bracket. But Gorio's was so close to a C, and then it got bumped up to a B at the last minute, and now I'm very embarrassed.
Hell yeah!
So one deck that is not copium is Living End. I feel like I've said this for every single deck, but Living End is a deck from Modern of old. It's existed in the format since a long, long time. Really simple strategy. It's trying to put creatures in the bin through the use of effects, ETBs, evokes, cycling to get large creatures into the graveyard, gain card advantage through that, and inevitably hit a cascade card, which is either Ardent Plea or Shardless Agent. And what you'll do is, because all your deck is 3 CMC or higher, when you cascade, you're going to hit a Living End. And for the purposes of a podcast, Living End puts everything in your bin onto the graveyard for you and your opponent. This deck got some really cool tools recently somewhat recently, I guess, with Modern Horizons 2.
Mm-hmm.
Both Subtlety, Endurance, and Force of Negation, which I guess was Modern Horizons 1, are all really big for this deck. Especially the Evoke Elementals, because they're free interaction that costs more than 3 mana, but then also go to your graveyard afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you're trying to outpace your opponent, you take a smart plan, you put creatures in your own graveyard, they get to Endurance you, to shuffle them to the bottom, and then they get all their own big stuff back. So pretty simple game plan, a lot of free interaction with cards like those 3 we just mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
but it's recently gotten a really cool tool in both Wistfulness and Deceit from Lauren.
Yep.
Both do everything that the deck wants to do. Interaction and or ways to put creatures into the graveyard. This deck, I've forgotten the name of the tournament, but a tournament a week ago, last weekend, it did really well. The top 8'd. And I think took a PT invite with it. I think Living End's really well placed.
I think it's your go, Dingo.
Yeah, so if you read the last modern BNR, they decided to emphasize how innovative and new Living End is of all decks, which still blows my mind to this day. But you know, we got Wistfulness, we got Deceit, and a Sultai Living End package. I believe it's Steven Yen, I think was his name, or maybe it was
Yes.
yeah, I want to say Steven Yen. He did well at the LDXP 10K in Tacoma. He could place 3rd, I believe.
Yeah, that
If
was
I
the
remember
event.
correctly. And I mean, I played quite a bit of Living End on my stream over the past 2 or so weeks. The deck seems really, really impressive. Now that you can just like hard cast Wistfulness, hard cast Deceit, you got Formidable Speaker to go tutor up your stuff as well. Hard casting Subtlety still pretty decent, even when you don't get to do your like turn 3, bring all my stuff back from the graveyard, and then wipe your opponent's board. I think with all of the free elementals that this deck has access to, and especially being a 3-color deck instead of some of the other lists were stretching to be like four colors and whatnot. But I think being like a 3-color, reliable, consistent version of Living End has made the deck a lot better than it used to be.
Mhm.
And I know like a lot of people were playing Bant for Ardent Plea, but I'm not sure that Sultai or Bant is the preferable version anymore. Either way, I think Living End is really strong. If I were to play a graveyard deck, I would lean more toward Living End than Gorio's by a pretty large margin. So I would say Gorio's is an A tier deck now that it has so much resiliency, and I would put it at like a 4 out of 10 for difficulty. It's really not that difficult.
I'd say you pretty much covered everything I would cover. I think that Living End, I would agree it's the better graveyard deck than Gorio's is. I'd have it again in A tier. I don't think it's quite got like the over to the top power of Amulet Titan and
Mhm.
Affinity and Boros and whatnot. But the shift from being like an all-in combo focused deck to an Overlord of the Bailmerk like value deck,
Mhm.
I saw some of the new builds are running Formidable Speaker.
Yeah.
Be able to tutor up your Shardless Agent,
Yeah.
go get your Sky Turtle or your Wistfulness or whatever you need to get out of whatever situation. But just being on like 8 pieces of free interaction with Subtlety and Force, and you can rebuy your subtleties with Overlord, like you get a lot of really good interaction, and your backup plan is just Overlord on 2, hardcast Endurance or something on 3, into hardcast Subtlety on 4, into hardcast Wistfulness on 5, and just like outpace every other creature deck in the format,
Mm.
or just hold up your free interaction for the combo decks or for anything aggressively creature slanted with Subtlety. Like, I really like the backup plan of Living End. I would honestly say I've like lost more games to them just curving out
Yeah,
creature
yeah.
into creature into creature than actually putting Living Ends on the stack. So I would have it A tier. I would agree that the difficulty is a little bit lower. Like for the most part, once you get to turn 3, 4, 5, if you want to just put a cascade spell on the stack every turn, you can and make your opponent deal with it. And then they deal with it, and you Formidable Speaker for a Halo Forager and make them deal with it again, or Endurance
Yeah.
yourself and deal with it again. And you just kind of repeat that ad nauseum. So it is a little bit lower on the skill ceiling. Play out your free stuff when you can. start casting living ends or just beat your opponent's face with derpy creatures. So yeah, solid choice.
I would actually recommend this deck if you're going to an RCQ season now and you're new to modern, or you're not really thought about modern. This is a great pick, I think, to go into this new season with. You mentioned Jesky Blink before, Mike, so let's talk about that. Sam, Jesky Blink is a mid-range deck. Tell me, a mid-range deck with some strong slants, somewhat combos in there. Tell me about Jesky Blink.
So Jesky Blink was really funny. Unlike almost every other deck we've talked about, or a good handful, this deck is actually relatively brand new to the modern format in the grand scheme of things. It won a spotlight, I believe, and then since then it has been in the top tier of modern. Jesky Blink is essentially with the release of Aether Drift, we sort of saw these Ketramos piles, and I see the Jesky Blink pile as like a spiritual successor to that strategy. It's trying to do the more fair element of modern. It's using cards like Felia and Quantum Riddler for combos. It's just like it starts in turn one of Ragavan, and then it plays out this like mid-range Blink game plan. It takes really good advantage of cards like Teferi, Time Raveler, Blinking. The newly printed Casey Jones is pretty cracked because you start drawing 6-9 cards a turn. The really impressive thing about this deck, though, and I think the one card we haven't spoken about too much, is this is a proactive consign to memory strategy. Consign to memory, if you were to ask me now, might be one of the strongest cards in modern. Definitely is one of the strongest, might be the strongest card in modern. The card is absolutely obscene.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's usually a cyborg card and you're bringing it against Tron, that sort of thing. Here, it's proactive. You can flick your opponent's creatures with Felia and then consign them on the trigger coming back. You are consigning Casey Jones triggers, so you don't have to discard cards at random. And like our good friend Boros Energy that we started this conversation with, this is an Arena of Glory Flage Tide of Nature's Wrath strategy. It plays that early game quite well with Ragavan, and then it does go on until turn whatever you want, essentially. The impressive element with this deck as well is there's always been like a back and forth in modern mid-range battles of card advantage. This deck drowns its opponent in card advantage now. The silly things you can do to draw cards here is absolutely ridiculous. But I think that proactive consign to memory strategy is what really highlights this deck as a top contender.
Yeah.
I guess this one's me. Yeah, so Jesky Blink to me is the top of A tier and like the next closest to getting to that Primeval Titan Affinity Boros kind of category, because the deck is the best elements of like the fair backup plan of, say, Gorio's Vengeance with Ephemerate Solitude, Ephemerate Riddler, whatnot. But you get to make that plan so much better because you also have Ephemerate Casey Jones and Ephemerate Flage, or consign any of these in any combination. So you're extremely proactive, you're very interactive, you're very present on the board, and you get to play a lot of these threats that are getting you tremendous amounts of value from like turn 2 onwards. Because just Felia blinking your Quantum Riddler, or Felia blinking a Casey Jones on 3 and then consigning the trigger the next turn. It creates these absolutely crazy swings, like Sam mentioned, in card advantage in the early turns if your opponent's not careful about that. And even if they are, everything they do to interact is just playing closer into Quantum Riddler, blowing them out of the water. Like you fight over everything turn 1 through 4, and all of a sudden here's a warped Riddler off an Arena of Glory. Draw 2 cards, draw another Riddler, play with your extra Arena mana, hit you for 8, draw 4 cards, whatever the case may be. So I think it can have some absolutely busted starts if you let it go. I think that the ceiling is a little bit lower than the S tier decks, just because the absolute like insane busted draws aren't quite as goldfishy. They still involve some amount of back and forth. But I would definitely put it top A tier for me. Difficulty kind of on the lower side, like 4, 5, maybe 5.5. I think that sequencing matters a little bit with stuff like
Yeah.
Arena of Glory or like floating your mana if you're warping a Riddler or whatnot, knowing what you want to proactively consign or ephemerate. But I think that the floor is pretty high in the deck too, where you just again get to be like a free pitch spell deck with a lot of ways to catch up on those cards.
Mm.
Yeah, I agree with what Mike you said for most of that. I do think that I would put Blink at the bottom of A or the top of B. I'm leaning more toward the bottom of A. I think this deck has a really, really difficult time with Planeswalkers. This deck
Yeah.
does not have a clean answer to Planeswalkers. Teferi Time Raveler dunks on you. And so does Flip Dejani. If you're ever getting yourself into a board state where an Ajani flips and it pluses, for example, and you can't take it off the table with Galv anymore, and you can't take it off the table with Flage, it's a hell of a card to be able to beat. So for that reason, having a strong weakness to Planeswalkers, I already think puts it at an A minus. Whereas like
Yeah.
you don't have a super powerful linear strategy to be able to just kill your opponent and ignore these Planeswalkers like some of the other decks like Affinity do. You actually really care about these Planeswalkers, and you have to put so much emphasis on trying to keep them off the table that it can be kind of hard to sequence with this deck and kind of hard to pilot this deck because you have to make multiple decisions every turn on how to manage your removal, how to manage your consigns,
Hmm.
especially with KC in the deck. Now your consigns are extra taxed, where it's like, okay, if I want to do this KC ephemerate stuff, I kind of need a consign of memory, otherwise I'm going to lose my entire hand anyways,
Yeah.
or I need to have a lot of stuff to do at instant speed before I discard 6 cards out of my hand and then I'm empty-handed. But, discarding Flage, not always bad because you can just escape it from the graveyard. I would give the difficulty probably like a 5.5 to a 6.5, somewhere in that range. I do think that playing a mid-range deck like this in a format as complex as Modern can be taxing in terms of how you sequence your spells and how you make your decisions every single turn. And I think it's a little bit more deceptively difficult than initially let on
Yeah.
when you just like look at this list on paper. So I'd put it at A minus and give it like a 6 out of 10 for difficulty.
Cool.
Yeah, I do find it like extremely funny that you mentioned planeswalkers because I know I was in Aspiring Spikes chat one time and he asked why Demir players are playing Kaito and like this was the matchup I pointed to.
Hmm.
Like Kaito can just solo the Jeskai Blink matchup like
Yeah.
no other card can.
Yeah, planeswalkers are a big problem for Jeskai Blink, especially Teferi. I've not been able to beat a Resolve Teferi very easily at all.
Yeah, even with the Galvs and that, and maybe Flage back up trying to target it, it's not the best, especially with that uptick in the Teferis and stuff. Should we go into the other sort of Blink deck then, which is the Esper version? So instead of playing red for Ragavans and for Flages and that stuff, they're actually playing black for Overlord of the Balemork and Emperor of Bones. Sometimes I've seen maybe Orcish Bowmasters, but they've sort of come off that now. But it's mainly Emperor of the Bones, Overlord of the Balemork, and just creating this like value engine, which I feel is. I'm not sure. I'll be interested to know what you guys say, but I feel like the Esper version of the Blink deck is actually a bit more powerful. So Sam, what is Esper Blink trying to do over Jeskai Blink?
If Jeskai Blink is the spiritual successor to those old or flash in the pan catch-mo strategies that we saw, then Esper is essentially the twin of those strategies, like really, really close.
Mm-hmm.
This deck asks, or is the answer to the question, what if Gorio's was better? Because it's removed that combo element from the deck entirely, and instead plays these very mid-rangey, grindy threats. Rather than the Casey Jones and sort of more consigney focus of Jeskai Blink, this deck does similar stuff, but again, this is a very, very strong 40 strategy, which with all the combo we see on the table is quite a strong card at the moment, or you need to play a good 40s deck. You can't just chuck it into, Mardu Energy like you used to be able to. Overlord of the Balemork is pretty good in this strategy as well. One thing for Jeskai Blink and Esper Blink is they can do their thing, but they do struggle to close out games sometimes. Their clock isn't always the best. Jesky Blink answers that question with Flage, and Esper answers that with Flickering Overlord of the Bailmerk. So you flicker it into play, you get some cards back, you get your Solitude back, and then all of a sudden you have a 3/3 Failure and a 5/5 Overlord, I believe it is, off the top.
5/5,
yeah. But it essentially asks the same questions that the Jesky Blink deck asks, but it answers them in slightly different ways.
I am gonna say this is my second deck in Copium tier. And the reason why I think this deck goes in Copium tier is because I don't think it's doing anything better than Gorio's. If the format slowed down a lot and it became a lot more grindy and the tempo didn't matter as much, I think this deck jumps up in the tiers. But as it stands right now, there are way too many combo decks in the format, and the format's way too fast to justify playing cards like Overlord of the Bailmerk and Flicker Wisp in my mind. And I would rather be on Gorio's, where if I had to choose between the Blink and the Gorio's, I think the Gorio's having a combo element to it and being a little bit faster and having a draw that's going to be able to beat decks like Storm more reliably. I think that's better. But it could also be in C tier for cat tier, because you should only play this list if you respect the cat. Respect the cat loves this deck. Plays Quantum Riddler in it and a black-white shell. It does well with it. It blows my mind how he does so well with it, because I think that the matchup spread of this deck is not very good. I don't think your combo matchups are great. I don't think your Tron matchup is good at all. I think your Jesky Blink matchup is probably good because you're a little bit bigger, grindier than them. But I just don't see the matchup spread being favorable for a deck like Esper Blink right now. And I think it also is a little bit harder than Jesky Blink too. So I would give it a 6.5 out of difficulty and put it in Copium tier.
It's really funny because when Josh was talking about thinking the deck was very powerful, all I could think was I'm about to rip this man apart, and then Dingo beat me to it. So where Dingo compared it to Gorio's, I'm going to compare it to Jesky Blink, where you've got a lot of the same overlapping cards with like Solitude, Ephemerate, Riddler, blah blah blah. But your backup plan is just so much worse. Like Jesky playing Ragavan, playing Flage, Arena of Glory, where Esper is on Emperor of Bones and Flicker Wisp and 4 Witch Enchanter. It just doesn't carry the same sort of floor that Jesky does. I don't think there's much of a reason to pick up Esper Blink over either Gorio's or Jesky Blink, unless you just like really want to cast Overlord of the Bailmerks. I think that's the backbone of the entire deck, but it's not a very strong backbone at the moment because it's not a deck that interacts very well into any unfair strategies. And we've already seen like Living In towards the top and Storm towards the top and Amulet Titan towards the top, Belchure in the middle, like all these decks that are not doing anything fair creature based on the battlefield. So I think Esper loses way too much momentum as soon as things aren't turn 1 derpy creature into turn 2 derpy creature.
I'll see you in Copium. I'll see you in Copium tier, Sammy.
Yeah, let's just move Gorio's down to Copium tier while we're at it. Really hit it where it hurts, Josh.
No. So we're saying that Esper is going right in the Copium tier.
Copium.
I'm gonna leave this here for now.
You can leave Gorio's.
Leave it right there.
Very good bone.
So, Mike, let's talk about a deck you love, and you've created a whole, I guess, social media presence on this deck, which is blue-black mid-range. Now I've put blue-black mid-range, and my picture is Psychic Frog, but there is 2 versions of this deck we could talk about, right? There's like the flash version, and then there's the straight-up mid-range Frog Riddler shenanigans now that it's doing. But Mikey, I'm actually going to ask you to describe what this deck does over Sam, because this, I feel like that's more appropriate. And Sam will hate the fact that I'm asking him to talk about Psychic Frog. So, Mikey, what is blue-black mid-range trying to achieve?
Sure. So the Flash variant, popularized by Aspiring Spike, is leaning more in on cards like Consult the Star Charts and Wan Shi Tong, Librarian, to gain card advantage at your opponent's in step, allowing you to hold up a lot of counter magic, a lot of instant speed interaction, without having to commit mana on your own turn. The payoff really is cards like Wan Shi Tong being able to gain additional advantage as the game goes on and cast a bigger Wan Shi Tong than the one before. So a lot of times it comes down to surviving. So you make it an extra turn. Your next Wan Shi Tong's a little bit bigger, draws you an extra card. Your Consult the Star Charts digs a little bit more for more specific answers. And you never have to worry about anything on your turn. The other mid-range variant, which I'm a little more fond of, like the Psychic Frog, Quantum Riddler, Kaito, Bane of Nightmares, Tameo sort of shell, is more trying to play the role of tap out control, trying to get on the battlefield aggressively with a card advantage engine like Psychic Frog, like Kaito, Tameo, and use free spells, Force Negation, and Subtlety to keep your opponent a little off kilter, off balance, until you're able to start slamming cards like Quantum Riddler to refill your hand, or use the card advantage from Kaito, Psychic Frog to drown your opponent in cards over the course of the match. You want me to go ahead and go into
Go for it. Yeah.
Heck yeah.
May as well. Keep that train rolling.
So for me, the Flash variant, I do have both of these in like different tier levels. The Flash variant, I know Aspiring Spike has a lot of success with it. I also think Spike is like a savant when it comes to knowing what his decks are trying to accomplish. And the average player picking up the 75 is not going to make the same lines of play that Spike does. So I've got the Flash variant in like bottom of B tier. You have a really tough time against aggressive creature decks. You can do pretty well into some of the unfair stuff, but you auto lose to Affinity. You're not great into Boros. You have a rough time keeping up the early games against decks like Jesky Blink. But if the game does go long, if you're able to make proper threat assessment, you can absolutely pull away with some of those games in the late game. For the mid-range variant, the Tameo, Psychic Frog, Kaito, I think that the floor is a lot higher because you are just trying to proactively get on the board. It's a lot easier to just say, oh, I've got turn 2 Psychic Frog with Force Negation, Subtlety in my hand, jam my frog and make my opponent do something about it. But I also think that variant is far more of a meta call. Like you're never beating Affinity in a million years with either of these variants. But if you're going into a format full of unfair decks and Primeval Titans, Storms, Belchures, Gorio's Vengeance, Neoforms, then the mid-range variant, since you're up on cards like Thoughtseize and Psychic Frog, can run through those rooms like nobody's business. You have an okay time into Boros, but again, it's a deck that you're playing a lot of underpowered cards. I think everybody who registers Psychic Frog in 2026 understands that compared to some of the other stuff going on, it is a little bit lower on the overall power level. But I would say the Flash deck, difficulty wise, is like 7.5. And I would put it near the bottom of B tier. The mid-range list, difficulty wise, I would say is like a probably fairly close, a little bit lower, like a 6.5, 7. And I would put it top of B tier if you have a reasonable idea of what you're running into, up to like middle of probably lower end of A tier. If you think you're going to see, like, if you have a reasonable idea of the room that you're going to see, and you can make a few metagame based adjustments, because it's a very customizable deck. You can absolutely target specific things, but if you target wrong, you're going to get punished pretty heavily for it. Sorry, I rambled forever.
No.
I don't think I have much to add. I'm pretty sure that Mikey knows this deck way more than I do, and I'm pretty sure he hit every nail on the head. Where the Boros matchup has a lot to be desired. I think I'd feel more comfortable putting this deck up higher if I thought the Boros matchup was actually good and not like probably a 45%er for you.
Mhm.
But if you run into a room full of combo, that seems like a great choice. So I'd probably put it in the middle of B.
Cool. Happy with B tier on. I put it's Psychic Frog, but we'll call it DB mid. So
B,
another
B.
so another mid-range, a similar sort of tempo-y interactive deck, as we've got blue-green mid-range. Blue-green mid-range. Well, I'll tell you what, Sam, you can explain this one.
Yeah, I adore this deck. Blue green mid range or blue green birthing ritual is very interesting. Pile, very interesting 75. Basically, you play cards of old like Coiled Oracle to gain advantage on the battlefield. Cards like Ice Fanquattle, Fibblefip the Lost to sort of gain a little bit of advantage. You then have this Shawless Agent package, another Shawless Agent deck, and what Shawless Agent is going to do is going to put one of the little guys into play, get some on the field value. It's going to put a Birthing Ritual into play. All Birthing Ritual lets you do is essentially at the end of your turn, look at the top 7 and upgrade one of those little guys into preferably an Abhorrent Oculus. So it's kind of funny because Modern's power level is so high, and this deck goes, well, actually, I'm going to make all of your cards worse because I'm playing terrible cards as well. Or your interaction has gotten a lot worse because you're spending it on rubbish cards. But it's a really good Oculus deck because with all these rubbish little guys, you get to play a lot of Salties, you get to play Flare Denial, and you get to play Force of Negation. So your interactive suite is premium here. It's almost very similar to Belchure in the fact that like you really get to take advantage of Flare Denial, which was a card a lot of people were excited for. And Subtlety is sneakily well placed at the moment. It's interesting that Living End's up there, and that's a really good Subtlety deck as well. But blue-green mid-range is kind of, I don't know, it's like, I guess I'd have to describe it as it's on the naughty step of Modern. It's there. Nobody really wants to acknowledge it, but I think it's in an interesting spot at the moment, honestly.
Well, let me just start by saying I'm so sorry that you like this deck because I think this deck is indeed here for Dookie Dog. I don't think this deck can beat a single Ocelot Pride ever. So I have a very, very low opinion of blue-green ritual. I think that your energy matchup is so horrendously bad that if you ever run into energy, you might as well sign the slip before you even sit down. Other than that, I think that your combo matchups are really good because you get all the access to subtlety and force negation and whatnot. But this deck probably has the most polarizing matchups of any deck on this sheet, to be honest. And if you run in the combo, you're gonna have a great time. If you play against a single Ocelot Pride, well, just pack it in, pack it up.
Yeah.
It's D tier for me, and I would say difficulty wise, it's probably like a 5 out of 10.
Yeah, I don't think my opinion's going to differ too much from that. I don't mind the Neoform deck, or not the Neoform, the Ritual deck. The issues I have with it are if you don't see Birthing Ritual, your deck is just absolutely trash tier, awful. And then you have absolutely horrendous matchups into 2 of the 3 S tier decks, with Affinity and Boros both being like absolutely awful for you. So it's really hard to justify playing a deck that's that rough into a couple really top tier matchups. Um, I would give it a bone and put it in C minus because maybe your local shop's got a bunch of like Eldrazi, Tron, and Amulet, and you can stomp up on those people. But if you're going into a blind RCQ or your room is anything like anybody else in North America, especially is dealing with, there's Ocelot Prides everywhere, there's Mox Opals everywhere. I wouldn't touch it. So
I
I'm
think-
fine with D tier.
Yeah, D is sadly very, very fair. And I think the best way to describe this deck is it's the best X1 FNM deck you're ever going to play. It's so fun. It's ridiculously fun to play. There's nothing more fun than looking at the top 7 cards of your library and realizing that you've not put any good ones in your deck. That's fantastic. Like, this deck is fun, but I don't think we're going to RCQs to have fun as a priority. That should be the, if you want to qualify, you've got to put at least one playable. Just on this topic, I think DT is very, very fair. One thing that Birth and Ritual players have started to do is put like 3 to 4 copies of Gemstone Caverns in their sideboards, so they can. But what I found with that strategy is you very rarely on the always lose. So like that doesn't even help the deck at all either. But yeah, I think D's fair. This deck kind of sucks. I love it. It's a fun FNM deck, but yeah, that's it's not an RCQ choice.
I think like difficulty wise, I'd put Birthing Ritual probably like a 4.5 or something. Like it's got some play here and there. Like you got to decide if it's worth sacking off a creature with a Birthing Ritual in play or whatnot. But the rest of the decisions are like, all right, I resolve my Birthing Ritual. This says Oculus, put it into play. Or, oh, none of these say Oculus, but this one says draw a card, put it into play. And outside of that, I don't think there's too many like integral decisions to be made.
Yeah. Cool. So we got two aggro decks and a big mana deck. So let's talk about the big mana deck first, which is a deck which is there's a couple of versions of this. It's like it splashes green, but I'm more interested in the Eldrazi colorless Tron version of the big mana deck. You know, you've seen green being splashed for that heinous card that was banned out of Legacy, which is called, what was it?
So in Micah
Spawn, absolutely horrendous. I remember I was playing Legacy when that was in. Absolutely disgusting times. But yeah, colorless Eldrazi Tron. Sam, explain.
Well, this deck has existed since the very beginning of Modern, even. This is... I mean, like, it's really interesting because jokes aside, a lot of this has been, this deck used to exist, here's a new iteration of it. I think actual factual Eldrazi Tron is a deck that has obtained the least amount of tools from Modern Horizons. You can argue differently for the So and Micah Spawn Eldrazi builds, but for actual factual Tron, the best 2 cards this deck has picked up recently is Karn, the Grey Creator from War the Spark, and Ugin Storm from Dragons of Tarkir, because they are basically now the best things you can do with that 7 mana. Does anybody remember a time where it was Karn Liberated? There was the best thing to do with 7 mana, and that was a nigh unbeatable threat, and it was crazy time, and now it's just nobody even cares. But they're basically, that deck strategy is now a strict upgrade of that of old. Ugin Storms is just a cracked card, to be honest, and it plays into these like mid-range fair decks very, very well, just because it basically says win the game in it to some extent. And then the Karn allows them to sort of play this prison package for what historically used to be quite hard matchups in the combo matchups. Still difficult for the deck, but this deck is realistically still trying to put A plus B plus C plus play 7 mana threat most of the time. I think on the topic of Tron, it's really worth noting that there's a blue version with Portent of Calamity that's a very, very long time Modo player has just done quite well with. But I think that honestly, like, this deck hasn't actually changed much. And I think that Ugin Storms, it's really funny because a lot of these cards we've seen, like, people expected them to be busted at the beginning of Modern, like Mox Opal, Wistfulness, and Ugin, and then they didn't do anything straight away. But we've slowly found the best 75 for them as Modern's progressed. I think Ugin's just cracked, to be honest.
I think you missed actually the best card of this deck out.
You did.
Oh yeah.
I was gonna say something.
Wait, what have I missed?
I'm gonna pass this over to Mike because he's gonna tell me, because this is not the big, this is these big mana cards that you're on about. They're all well and
Yeah.
good, but the best card in the deck,
Oh yes, right. Yeah,
Kozilek's
okay,
command.
Kozilek's
Yeah.
command,
Pretty
sent
good.
this deck. It sent Eldrazi Temple decks into overdrive. I forgot which order it is, lads, who's talking first, but it's one of yours. So.
I'll take it because I'll
'Cause I'm
be
gonna start
salty about
ranting.
Kozilek's command first. I think this is like the most egregiously designed card in the last 10 years. Easy.
It's
Everything.
awful.
Like at any point in the design process, they could have taken one less suggestion and the card would have been fine. Like, don't make it an instant. Great. Don't make it an Eldrazi spell. Great. Don't make it like target on every mode. So if you blank one of them, the spell fizzles. Great. Take off any one of the abilities, and it's fine. We can settle on that.
It'd still be playable as well.
It would be, and it would still be fantastic. But I think it's like my pick for the best card in Modern that's not ban worthy, unfortunately, though I want it to be. But Eldrazi in general, I've got a really low opinion of the deck overall. I think it's really cool. I think you've got some fun stuff going on. I think it has some issues with some very popular sideboard cards. So Damping Sphere is out there. Blood Moon's out there. You get raced if you don't have some big, like, all is dust over the top spell. You get raced by like Boros. You get stormed off on easy. Every deck's a consigned to memory deck if they're playing any amount of blue.
Mm-hmm.
Amulet Titan runs you over like nobody's business. I wouldn't pick up Eldrazi personally. I think the deck is a pain to run into on Magic Online because everybody's running it in leagues all over the place.
Yeah, they are, yeah.
But I don't think for an RCQ it's where I would want to be. So I would say like power level or ranking wise, I'd put it bottom of B tier. It's a functional deck. It does its thing pretty well. But I think it has a very difficult time, like either A, not losing to itself to win tournaments, or B, fighting through the things that people are doing to fight it. So ranking bottom of B tier, difficulty wise, probably like a 3. Like play the lands that make a bunch of mana, cast big spell ahead of curve, and assume your opponent can't do anything about it.
You gotta be able to.
I wish this deck.
You just gotta be able to
Sorry,
count
go
to 7, right? 1, 2, 7. That's how you do it.
With Kozilek's command, you don't even have to count to 7. You just got to go like temple. Oh, you lose.
Sorry, Dingo.
First off, where's Will Hall to complain about this deck? Second off, I wish this deck was a little bit better, just so that way they would have a reason to actually pull the trigger and get Kozilek's command out of the format. Because, my God, I hate playing against that card more than any other card in Modern, probably, except for maybe barring Urza Saga. Those are probably my picks for the two single-handed.
We all hate Urza Saga on this pod. I like that.
I would say those are like the two most powerful cards in Modern by themselves.
Yes.
But the decks that they go into are good enough to be considered for getting them out of the format. Regardless, I do think Tron's better than B-. I think it's like B+ to A- because you have such a good blink matchup. I think any deck that's trying to play a fair game against you is going to get murdered. They're just going to get straight up murdered. And also, I think you have decent game against Affinity because of Karn and like Trinisphere and some of the other stuff you get to play for Affinity, including Vexing Bauble. So I think you have good matchups into Blink at Affinity, and for that reason alone, I think Tron's okay. I don't think your energy matchup's terrible either because of Sire of the Seven Deaths. If you can get turn 3 Sire of the Seven Deaths, you probably win on the spot. But Tron's inconsistent. It always has been since its inception with Sylvan Scrying and maps and whatever, way back when it was Green Tron. But the deck's also one of the easiest decks in the format, if not the easiest deck in the format. I'd give it like a 1.5 to 2 out of 10 in terms of difficulty for how to play it. Most of the misplays I've seen that come out of Tron are choosing the Mozon Kozilek's command more than anything else. A lot of people tend to not pay the full price for Kozilek's command to see more cards in their deck and dig deeper, which always blows my mind. But obviously, Consigned Memory is a super powerful card against you, and that's what's going to be holding this deck back more than anything else. But I still think it's a solid linear deck, and I wouldn't fault anybody for taking it to the RCQ, at least. RC, maybe different story. But I put it at top of B, bottom of A.
Please don't play this
Yeah,
deck.
I was trying to give Eldrazi a little bit of credit. You mentioned having it as a 1 out of 10 on the difficulty. I was thinking, oh, the lowest I've given so far is like 3.5. Put Eldrazi at 3, give him some percentage points. But I agree that it's probably the most autopilot deck in the format by a good
I think
margin.
it's the easiest deck in the format by far.
It is a good deck to pick up. For going into a modern seasons, particularly if you're not you don't know the format too much, because it is, again, linear, easy to play, etc. But please don't play this deck, because I don't want to play against Celtic Command. I just don't want to do it.
Like, Tron is the working man's 9 to 5 deck. You don't have to have any reps on the deck. You just pick it up, you 1/2/7 and cast the unbeatable planeswalker.
Sorry, Sam, you're going to say something then?
No, I just forgot about the 5th mode on Kozilek's command, where my opponent cast it. Chose one of the modes was neuralize opponent. Forget about Kozilek's command. That's really funny. I also forgot about Ugin's Labyrinth as well. So, I'm very proudly never going to say, didn't get anything from On Horizons ever again. Obviously, talking absolute rubbish.
Like,
that is
what
not
is this
true.
guy on about?
Yeah, I
You
got
were
a
so
funny
proud
look.
about
I
Karn and
know.
Ugin. I was
I
like,
know,
oh,
I'm
well,
so
if it passes
sorry.
to me, I guess I'll mention this Kozilek's
Yeah,
command card.
maybe
The
mention. Yeah.
The only good thing
I-
about this, Sam, is that now everyone's forgot about my Esper Blink comment saying it's better
Yeah,
than
thank you.
Jesky. So,
Well, I just want to say, on a difficulty scale, this deck should be a 7, but that's realistically 3. Right. I think
that's
it,
pretty good. I like that.
it should be a 7,
Poetry
but that
stab.
goes 1, 2, 7.
Yeah.
Right? That's
So where are we putting this? Was it a B tier or was it an A tier or where was it?
I think it's B,
I said bottom of B. Dingo said top of B.
top of B, mid
yeah, I
B.
think B's
Yeah,
fine.
middle of
yeah.
B somewhere.
And what's really funny is without Kozilek's command, I think that would be a D, and that's the one card I forgot about this whole.
Without
Yep.
Kozilek's command, it would be like F- tier.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
is the only card that gives that
Yeah.
deck redeeming qualities in my eyes.
And in terms of redeeming qualities, Josh, what
Yes.
deck do you want me to talk about and get correct next?
let's. I want to keep Zoo till last. Let's
Okay.
do Prowess.
Okay, Prowess. Cards from Horizon sets. It's got Dragon Rage Chandler. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
But Prowess is your classic blue-red tempo aggro deck strategy. It's more aggro than tempo. It's basically replaced burn. If we look at the format, you're either doing something really, really unfair or something very, very mid-rangey or multiple axes. Prowess is a bit simpler than the other strategies here. Corey Seal Cutter is a hell of a magic card.
Mhm.
I think that Corey Seal Cutter really revitalized and breathed life into this
It makes this
pretty
deck.
dead strategy. Yeah, it
makes
does.
this deck. Yeah.
I can see Josh is checking up on what I'm saying now just to make sure I'm covering the important cards. But no, this deck's pretty good. I mean, like, in terms of strategy to exist in modern, I like it existing. It's also like it's kind of doing the Death Shadow thing a little bit. It's a really good Mishra's Bauble deck, which Death Shadow used to be. Rather than a team of Battle Rage, it's using Violent Urge as its like double strike
Yep.
spell and stuff. Prowess is literally play creatures, make them big, attack in, and it's really nice seeing Mutagenic Growth still seeing play in 2026. What card did I miss, guys? What card did I miss?
Slick shot show off.
Yeah, that card's pretty good.
Anytime
say
I
unholy
think I'm safe against Prowess, I like 15 plus life and I'm tapped out. I got no removal. I just die to Slick Shot show off. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
The explosiveness of Prowess, I think, makes it a deck that you can't sleep on. And I think the only downside, or not the only downside, but the major downsides of Prowess are your Amulet Titan matchup and your Energy matchup. Both of them are abysmal. Titan plays 1 Arboreal Grazer, and suddenly your Slick Shot show off sucks. Energy plays a Flage and a Guide of Souls, and suddenly they're at 30 life, and you're like, wow, I can't kill him from 30. Unless you have like Violent Urge to give your Slick Shot show off Double Strike, or you have infinite cutter tokens, but you don't really have that much time against these decks. So I would say Prowess is pretty well positioned against most other decks that aren't like Affinity, Energy, and Titan. And for that reason, I would probably give it like a top of B, bottom of A, somewhere where like Tron is. But again, you have some really bad matchups, and also Prowess is kind of hard to play. Sequencing your cantrips and your spells and your lava darts matters quite a bit, and also you just have to be really good at math when playing the deck. So I'd probably give it like a 5.5, 6 for difficulty, and I think bottom of A, top of B.
Yeah, so it definitely sounds like we've got some similar opinions on this one. I do think it's got a really bad Boros matchup, really bad Titan matchup. And for those reasons, I'm putting it lower. Like, I think that you're 50-50 into the majority of the field. It's like not those 2 decks. You're really good against Simic Ritual, but Simic Ritual's down there in dog water tier.
Dog.
So,
Everything's good against Simic Ritual, to be fair.
So I can't really give that as a point of credit to Prowess. I think the deck is like deceptively good as well because of how proactive it is. So
Yeah.
kind of like Boros Energy, if your opponent stumbles and they don't see the interaction, they miss the land drops, like you can absolutely just run them over with a Slick Shot or Quarry Steel into Quarry Steel Bobble or whatever. So it does have some pretty high roll draws, but I just think that like the popularity of Boros and Jesky Blank and Amulet Titan, regardless of whether I think Amulet Titan should be that popular, just means that Prowess is like in a rough spot if you're actually planning on trying to win an event. So I'd have it closer to like bottom of B tier, but also had Tron bottom of B tier. So I think it's kind of funny that we both have Prowess and Tron like around the same spot, just whether it's bottom of A, top of B, or bottom of B, top of C. I don't think there's a whole lot of reason to go out and say, "Oh, I need to be picking up Prowess for this event."
Yeah.
Difficulty wise, I don't know, like a 4. I kind of same idea where if your opponent's at 20 and you just need to goldfish and get them dead, you can get them dead pretty easy. If you need to play around stuff a little bit, it definitely gets harder. But for the most part, all of your spells kind of have one function. Like I'm gonna cantrip after I've got a prowess creature out. My mutagenic growth is going to allow me to either survive a lightning bolt or deal more damage. Those are my only options. And it's just navigating which of those is correct. So more difficult than Tron, less difficult than anything that actually has to be reactive on a regular basis.
So we're going like
I'm cool with bottom of B.
We're going like a high B. High B, cool.
I would say like mid B, maybe. I don't know. Somewhere around that area. It's very much, it feels like a Tron pick to me, where it's like if you can win the Magic lottery, then you'll do all right. But it's hard to justify when Boros Energy is 20% of the meta right now.
Yeah, if you found that room where 75% of the field is on Simic Ritual, and you've got like you got Prowess in your back pocket, good on you. You deserve that invite.
I think this is really attractive to new players. I think it's because it's cheap. It looks cool. It's aggressive, but I think there's more to it than just picking it up and playing it. Like attacking you. As Dingo said, there's a lot of maths to it, right? And then we have the last deck that's on this list is the Zoo deck, Domain Zoo. It has a somewhat of a nut draw. I'm not sure how good that nut draw is in nowadays modern, should I say? But Sam, what's Domain Zoo all about?
So before I explain the deck, I really hope this ends up in D for Domain Zoo. That'd be funny. But Domain Zoo is essentially a large creature with some counterspell backup strategy. The nut draw that Josh alluded to is basically leyline. What's that leyline called, actually?
Leyline the Guild Pact.
Guild Pact.
Of the Guild Pact. So, as all with leylines, if it's in your opening hand, you can solve it in play. And basically, it makes all creatures every color and all lands every type. That combos really, really well with Scion of Draco, which basically makes costs 2 less, and you can play for 2. And with those 2 in play, all of your creatures have a lot of stats, one of which is hexproof, I believe, which is pretty crap.
Hexproof, lifelink, vigilance, trample.
Yeah, trample. So you kind of
first strike.
Yeah, pretty good stat line on any creature, to be fair. So outside of that, it's called Zoo because you play a lot of creatures that just so happen to be different types of animals. You've got Ragavan, you've got Territorial Carvu. The thing with Zoo as a concept is Zoo plays creatures that are above rate. Ragavan's one of the best one-drops in the game. Territorial Carvu is like a 2-mana 5/5 most of the time. This deck got some interesting developments relatively recently. You've got a really good removal spell now. You get to interact on that axis as well. And I think one of the strongest cards in this deck is probably Stubborn Denial, which is just a 1-mana negate 90% of the time. It's also a Flay strategy, and they've started doing this thing recently where they play a card called Doorkeeper Thrall, which is a flash threat that stops ETBs. So it stops the Flage, sacrifice unless escaped ETB. So you can play a bit of an unfairer scam package if it wants to. This deck did used to exist back in the day as well, but we've come a long way from battle and stuff. Scion of Draco really is the concept of that nut draw is where I think this deck's sort of attractiveness lies in, really.
All I'm gonna
Is it my
say
turn?
about this deck,
Or-
I think I was gonna go first on this one, but the number one thing I want to highlight about this deck is that Wild Nakatl used to be banned for a reason. I'm just saying. No, I think this deck is absolute dookie dog.
Dookie
Doorkeeper
dog.
Thrall domain zoo tier.
Hell yeah.
It's supposed to have a
ETB
good
this
energy matchup.
D.
Yeah. It's supposed to have a good energy matchup, and then modern data recently came out showing that it had a 40% win rate against energy, when that was one of the main things that it was trying to play against, because Leyline plus Scion is supposed to be unbeatable, but energy's just winning anyways because they're going so wide with Guide Pride, and unless Zoo has a bunch of removal to back it up also, they just can't outvalue the Guide Pride synergy. And Goblin Bard Manajani also can blank attackers going through the first strike lifelink, so I don't think there's any good reason to play Zoo right now. It is okay against combo decks, but I think there's a lot of other decks on this list that I'd rather play if I were expecting a field of combo, because Zoo only has a finite number of Stubborn Denials in the deck. And then once you run out of your 3 Stubborn Denials, you're kind of just hoping that your creatures get there. They are a good rate, but your mana base is wonky. Your removal can be clunky. The deck's power level goes down when you don't draw, open Leyline of the Guild Pact. And then when you draw Leyline of the Guild Pact, you feel like, what the hell am I doing here? So for me, it's the difficulty wise, I give it like a 2.5. It's not a very hard deck to pilot, aside from maybe like fetching your lands, but I'm not very high on the deck at all.
Yeah, so I guess my hot take is Zoo, I think, was better before it swapped to the Leyline of the Guild Pact plan. I think when it was like Neshoba Brawler, Tribal Flames, all that, and just got your opponent dead, it did a better job of like being more proactive, did a better job of playing to the board, regardless of where we fall on the Wild Nakatl ban discussion. I think that variation just had like more gameplay into its bad matchups. You play against Tron, you're just Ragavan into Kavu, Stubborn Denial your thing, into Tribal Flames you twice and you're dead. The nut draw out of Zoo, the Leyline Scion starts are cool. Like Dingo alluded to, it's really sweet when you gain 4 life and then your Boros opponent gains like 17 off of their double Ocelot Pride, and you're like, oh well, I'm not racing that very well, am I? I think difficulty wise, yeah, deck's pretty low, especially games that start off with Leyline of the Guild Pack when like you can't even mess up fetching. But if you take out the Leyline draws, it gets a little more difficult. But I don't think that the deck is doing enough like powerful things. I think I've got it really neck and neck with like Gorio's, where if you don't do the unfair thing, you can't win a tournament. But even if you do the unfair thing with Domain Zoo, there's a decent chance you're still not winning. Or like Gorio's does the unfair thing and you're probably winning with the Traxa or whatnot. Leyline Scion can do their thing and still just like have a Psychic Frog stand in front of them and discard 4 cards and nothing you can do. So I'd put it like very bottom of C tier. If we really aggressively want to even out the pyramid and put it at the top of D tier, I wouldn't turn it down, but it's pretty low for me as well.
I mean, if your nut draw can literally be blocked by Quantum Riddler,
yeah,
that's a really good point. Yeah. I think with Zoo in particular, I think that people have they look upon the Domain Rhinos deck quite fondly and go, oh, we don't have the Rhinos package anymore, but I can still do this like Leyline Sound stuff, and I just don't think it hits the same. Like, you know, everyone is going above you or around you or under you. Like, there's, you know, I can't think of a modern deck that I'd play other than Prowess, and I'm like, oh, I can't believe, you know, I've been paired into this one's going to be tough. You know, like I think that every other deck on this list can beat to quite not easily, but can beat to consistently, which is important.
Yeah.
So D for Domain Zoo.
I have a proposition. Can we put another tier below D that says large gap, and then another tier that just says blue-green ritual?
Oh.
I think that deck is just so much worse than every other deck on this list.
I disagree. I think that if you want to win an RCQ, Birth and Ritual, I can't even think of someone to say. No, it's probably true. Yeah.
If you want to win an RCQ, Birth and Ritual is to be left at home.
Yeah, but it's really funny because
it's fun though. It's a fun deck.
Yeah, but who wants to have fun at Magic events? Not a chance. This is all about the grind. This is what makes me laugh the most about Birth and Ritual is it is not a great deck, and like you could change some of the best decks on this list, and it would like still not be a great deck. It's just so funny that your 2 unwinnable matchups are Affinity and Boros, which are the 2 decks that sit at the top of S tier. Like
best decks.
So
yeah, like
So lads, I thought this was a really great conversation, and I thought this was a really great conversation for someone who's looking into the new modern RCQ format and thinking, well, where do I even start? I'm looking at MTG Goldfish. What deck should I be playing? Like which is for me? And I think this is a great tool for something like that. But before we sort of finish, I just want to go across the room and I want to ask you, what would be your other pick, as in your off-meta whatever pick that we haven't mentioned, what you would give it on the rating scale, the difficulty scale as well, and then just maybe a little bit about it, but not too much because we are literally, this pod has gone on for longer than anticipated. Let's start with you, Mike. What would be your other pick for this new RCQ format?
So my other pick would be any of the red, black, X Moon Shadow variants. I think that you can customize those decks a pretty good ways to have good matchups into like Boros by adding a bunch of extra spot removal. Some of your combo matchups you can get fixed up by just being a very proactive Thoughtseize deck with a piece or 2 of disruption. Moon Shadow's an underestimated clock. Moon or Death Shadow plus Abigail can solo the Boros matchup like nobody's business. Difficulty wise, I would say the deck's like 6.5, somewhere around there. Your sequencing early can really dictate how good cards like Moon Shadow are. which you really need them to be at their best to be able to compete with some of the power that Modern's got rolling around. Ratings wise on the scale, I would probably put it bottom of B tier, like in that
Okay.
that prowess Tron spot
Mhm.
where I put prowess and Tron, not
Mhm.
necessarily where Dingo put them. I think that the deck is got some bits to be desired. It is very underpowered, kind of like the other Psychic Frog variants, but the high roll like Thoughtseize into Thoughtseize, Death Shadow,
Mhm.
Teamer Battle Rage, or Abigail hands can absolutely blow some matches out of the water.
Cool. Dingo.
I have a couple that I let me just say like two that I'm not gonna give a rating to
Sure.
or put on the tier list, but I think it's worth like knowing about for this modern RCQ format, and that
Sure.
is sewer combo decks with Emery and Grinding Station because they're getting more popular,
Yes.
and it's just worth at least thinking about having a game plan against those decks if you are going to play the RSQ season. Likewise, there's some like Leonardo, Soul Cauldron, Ballista decks that have been popping up that have been doing okay here and there. So just a couple of other decks that you should have on your radar when going into the RSQ season. Not saying you're going to play against them because they're definitely not popular, but those are some kind of dark horse decks that I'm not gonna rate. I'm not gonna put a difficulty on because they're like fresh and new with TMNT, and they haven't had a lot of time to develop, so they're still in very much their infancy phases.
Mhm.
Two decks that I do want to rate and put on this tier list that I think probably deserved a spot. One of them being Blue White Control. I
Okay.
think Blue White Control is it got second place at the LDXP 10K Modern Invitational PTQ this last weekend, and it had some boomer cards like Celestial Colonnade and Vendilion Click and Jace the Mind Sculptor, really cool cards. I think that deck's actually quite good. It has a pretty good energy matchup, and I think you could tune the deck in various ways to be able to beat any of the top tier decks. You also have a really good combo matchup. So I would put Blue White Control probably at the bottom of A,
Okay.
and I would give it a 9 out of 10 difficulty rating because knowing when to cast your Orange Chant is probably one of the most difficult things in Modern right now. Is when do I use this Orange Chant as like a pseudo time walk, but like the world's worst time walk? When do I hold it and try to rip the scepter off the top or dig for the scepter? I don't know. The deck's really, really hard. It's very reactive. I think it's quite strong, but it's customizable to a metagame.
Mhm.
Likewise, I think we didn't even talk about potentially the best Kozilek's command deck being Brood-Scale.
Yes.
Brood-Scale is a deck that kind of is on the downswing because it doesn't have a very good energy matchup because you're trying to have a 2/2 survive against energy. It's really difficult. But I think Brood Scale can also be built in a way so it's more of a ramp shell, and then it'll actually give you a pretty good matchup against energy if you build
Mhm.
it more in like a ramp style with Emrakul at your top end and
Yeah. Yeah.
like the Turbo Rumble. But I think that deck is probably top of B, bottom of A. I'd probably leave it at top of B, and I would say that deck's probably like a
It's
5 out of 10 difficulty rating.
it's hard to play against as well, which adds to that. Sam, do you want to mention any?
Josh, I want you to mention yours, and then I'm going to mention mine, and with no room for discussion, I'm going to end the pod. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Okay.
I've been looking at creativity, the 4-color versions. I just like the idea of having this control package with Teferi and all that sort of stuff. And I'm not saying it's good at all, but I just like the idea of it. Is all.
Have you seen the Rakdos Gorio's creativity lists popping up?
No, I've not actually. I've just seen like
They're
the
kind of
the ones
fun.
with the white, like you can play like Rafa Skies and stuff if you, and then just untap, like Ren and sixes and all that sort of stuff. Like I don't know, it just looks quirky and fun. I'm not saying it's good, but I've seen a couple of lists popping up. I'd probably put it C. It's definitely above Zoo and Blue Green mid range, but I'd put it C tier.
Doesn't take much.
That's not saying much, is it?
Okay. So I'm
Please
going
don't
to.
end this on lantern control. Please don't do it.
No. So I have to be honest. I've taken quite a beating this episode. So I'm gonna. The question was, what off meta deck that people aren't expecting, that people don't respect, might be able to win games with. And ironically, I do think that choice might be blue-green Birth and Ritual. the absolute crash of respect from this call, or this pod. Sorry, I think. I'm going to win an RCQ with this just to spite myself. It's going to be.
I'm going to win with this out of spite.
It's going to be a 2-person RCQ, and my opponent doesn't turn up. But I'm going to get my invite with strategy.
Mate, that does sound like an American RCQ, to be fair.
So, look.
It really is. You send me your deck, I guarantee you I can get an RCQ invite with Birthing Ritual at like a 3-man event an hour and a half from here in the middle of the Louisiana swamps, where I'm just playing against like an alligator and some dude that can't spell his name. I will be perfectly fine.
This
Louisiana.
No, this is like, imagine you're in the 3-man RCQ with Birth and Ritual and you get a game loss for illegal deck or something. That'd be fantastic. You're physically incapable of winning, but I'm gonna leave it on the Birth and Ritual. I'm gonna play this deck at FNM this week. I'm gonna have a great time doing it, and I'm gonna think about this conversation, and it's gonna haunt me.
Did you say Birth and Ritual, or do you mean Grixis Reanimator?
Oh, my choice was originally Grixis Reanimator. I'm dying on this Birth and Ritual train now. I've been sacked. Somebody's fetching a spell that costs CMC 1 more than me. That's fine. I've been sacked to Birth and Ritual. Josh, should we wrap it up there?
Yes, lads, thank you very much for coming on this. This has been an absolute fun podcast. I think it's going to be very valuable to someone who's got a couple of hours to listen to some modern breakdowns from 2 of the biggest personalities in the modern sort of metagame, I guess. But yeah, I want to thank you both for coming on. And Sam, I want to thank you for being here as well. And
it's not been a good one to be thanked for, but I'll take it. I'll take where I can.
Do you have any shout outs, lads, before we end the pod?
If you don't mind, I'll just plug my own Twitch channel.
Yeah, man, do it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I stream pretty much daily over at twitch.tv/YungDingo. Also post all of my good enough leagues on YouTube over at youtube.com/@YungDingo. So if you're interested in spectating some modern content or just having any questions for me, find me there.
Links below. Mike?
Pretty well, same thing. Twitch.tv/the_CntrlFreak. Monday, Tuesday, Thursdays, about 1 p.m. Central Time to whenever we get through with a couple leagues. Mostly Dimir, Blue Black X, Frog decks, Shadow decks, stuff like that. Same thing with Dingo. Any of the interesting leagues, if we learn something cool happens, you can find them over on YouTube at the_CntrlFreak. And that's about all I got.
Cheers
for having us.
Sam, will you take us away, please, mate?
Well, thank you both very much for coming on. I've been absolutely battered myself. I'm currently in the D tier. I have actually really enjoyed having this conversation. People at home listening, watching, we're going to include all of the links, Twitches, X's of our very wonderful guests in the description. So please do check those out. I do check the streams out regularly myself. Very good quality. I definitely recommend checking them out. Thanks again to our wonderful sponsors at UltraPRO. If you've enjoyed this episode, please like, share, comment, subscribe. For small-time content creators like me and Josh, the engagement really does boost on the algorithm, so please do that. Would you take Birth and Ritual to an RCQ? Let us know in the comments, and we will catch you next time.
Bye, everybody.